to you. And again, you can please feel free to unmute or type questions in the chat or whatever you like. And yeah, so I'll share my slides and start. Like I said, I did also build in some spots where we could chat or where I have questions. So it'll pay to be staying awake when I ask my questions. Let's see. So are you just seeing the slide right now and not like the little speaker view?
I have the slide and the speaker view up right now.
Oh, you do?
Yes.
What?
Don't ask me how I did it.
Okay, how about now? Now you just have the slide?
I have a slide in the next slide and you.
Yeah, okay, well, that's the speaker view. Okay. Let me just try one more time.
Okay, I have this, yeah. I have the slide in you right now.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm going to talk about marketing strategy for the most part, and then get into a little bit more nuts and bolts about doing farmers markets, being at farmers markets. But mostly I'm going to set the base for strategy. If you're mostly in the early stages of developing your business, I really want to stress now, and then I'll probably end up saying it 10 more times. The idea of having a marketing plan, which I'll walk you through, and having a strategy is actually to reduce the amount of time that you spend on marketing. So what I always say is and I might even say this on a slide, the less you like the idea of the marketing part of farming, or the marketing part of any business, frankly, if it was a bakery or whatever, the less you like marketing, the more you need a plan, because um, shooting from the hip marketing is less effective, it's messier, and it's more time consuming than planned marketing. So what I really encourage you to do is try to carve out small sections of time to work on a marketing plan, and to work, even if it's once a month, you sit down for an hour and plan your marketing for that month. That's going to pay off better than getting halfway through a day and thinking, oh, I should just like take a picture and put it on Instagram and you'll say something. It's just, that's the point of working on a strategy. So I'm going to walk you through, I think in a fun way, um, how to work on your marketing. And I get that production is probably why you are interested in agriculture. Production is how you want to spend your days, and the business side can be less exciting than, I don't know, weeding. I get that. And I have this as a old slide that I made a long time ago, but the point in business planning, because I understand that a lot of you are early in your business, is remembering that sustainable agriculture means financially sustainable, as well as, if we want to talk about ecologically sustainable. But your business plan is a process of thinking through how you can make money, enough money to continue, and how you can retain joy in pursuing what you wanted to pursue, doing work that you like to do. And I'll give you an example. Jimmy Buffett, he wrote a book, and one of the short stories in there is that this farmer in like Arizona hired a consultant to figure out what was the highest profit per acre. What could he grow that had the highest profit per acre? And the consultant went away and did all this work and came back and said, purebred Chihuahuas. All right, like that's the highest profit per acre. You can raise hundreds and hundreds of purebred Chihuahuas, but that's not what he wants to do, right? He doesn't want an acre of Chihuahuas. So even though that make lots of money, it doesn't deliver satisfaction and enjoyment, and you'd burn out and you'd get sick of it. Likewise, raising one lamb and just laying in the field of daisies and looking at your one lamb in the sunshine and feeling very relaxed isn't going to keep you economically sound. So your business plan is, giving up a little bit on the smiley face side of the continuum, giving up a little bit on the money side, and finding a sustainable point in which you still like what you're doing, and you're making enough money to continue doing it. So that's business planning in one slide. But I just wanted to hint at that, that concept of what business planning is. You're wandering back and forth between these two sides until you find a sustainable point. And part of a business plan is the marketing plan. So my definition of marketing is that it's a process. So every word in here is chosen carefully, meaning unlike production work, marketing is never done. I mean, you plant a crop in production, and then you wait until it's mature and you harvest it, and then production's over. But marketing just keeps going because it's this ongoing process of understanding what consumers want. And what they want changes seasonally and year to year with, trends and culture shifts. So, taking the time to understand what consumers want, then developing a product to satisfy that customer. And, when I say product, I have a lot of meat examples probably, but ground beef is just ground beef, but it's not just ground beef. There's a lot of different ways to market ground beef. So your product that you develop can change depending on what the consumer wants. And then finally, very practically speaking, getting it to them. So where and how do you sell your stuff? How do you get payments? What's the fulfillment system? That's the getting it to them part. So marketing is understanding what the consumer wants, developing the product, and then getting it to them. And so when it comes to a marketing plan, I recommend a 4-part plan. And this could be a single sheet of paper. I'm not talking about researching and writing a book that's 20 pages long. But the point of the plan is really just like the point of the strategy, is to give direction. It's to inform the direction of every action that you take with marketing. And I mean every action. Of course, you make a brochure or you make a website or you create your Facebook page. Of course, you need direction in those actions, but even other decisions that you make in marketing, like where am I advertising? And I would argue right down to what does my market stall look like if I'm doing a farmer's market? What does my packaging look like? What bags do my customers carry my product away in? All of that can be informed by your plan. So the first part, arguably the most important part, is your strategy, which is in which you identify your target audience. We'll walk through that. And then market research, I have some stuff written in here like market sizing, which is, understanding the market around you, how big it is, sales projections, understanding demand and trends. But it mostly has to do with taking that group from the audience identification and taking the time to understand them. That's the most important part of market research. So it's not necessarily going into databases and understanding survey data. And then formulating objectives to guide your actions. And finally, communication is what the consumer sees. That's the products that people will see, like I said, the brochure and the website. So I'm going to walk through really stressing the first 2 points. When it comes to developing a marketing strategy, you're going to think about your customer base, and hopefully your target audience. And you're going to think about literally why do they do what they do when they buy stuff? And we're mostly going to focus on food, right? So why do people buy food the way that they buy it and the places that they buy it? We could think about this like, I don't know, this is a 30-year-old mom with a 11-month-old baby on her hip. And when it comes right down to it, when she decides to go buy food, she gets in her car and she chooses to drive to either the grocery store or the farmer's market. And I'd ask you, here's the first chance to maybe unmute. Please unmute. Why would she choose to go to the farmer's market instead of the grocery store?
Convenience.
Convenience?
Your grocery store convenience, I'd say.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say the farmer's market is anything but convenient. Yeah. But why would she go to the farmer's market instead of the grocery store?
Quality.
Okay.
You can't get at the grocery store.
Okay, quality.
The experience.
The experience.
Yeah,
I mean, it's certainly a social experience. Yep.
Knowing where your food is coming from.
Knowing where your food is coming from.
that image of being like a wholesome mom that shops organic and, you know, very natural kind of mom.
Yeah, so I mean, can I turn that into like the perception that the food is healthy, safe? That's sort of what you're saying, that perception. And knowing where your food comes from, whoever said that, like, could you refine that, get more specific? Why does she want to know where her food comes from?
Knowing, I guess, if it's grown with GMOs or
Okay.
any kind of allergens and cross contamination, that kind of thing.
Okay, so that comes back to the wholesome organic comment that was made. Yeah, so I agree with these things. I think that another part of knowing where your food comes from might be like the desire to support local agriculture, right? Okay, so we've thought about why would she go to the farmers market. Actually, the farmers market, they've done studies all over the country for decades. It's the least convenient way that you could possibly buy food. It's a market that's open for 3, 4, 5 hours a week, and they don't have toothpaste or toilet paper. And I mean, it's a very inconvenient way to get food. So there's other reasons that are driving people there. All right, so if this mom has come to the farmers market for the very first time, like she just moved to town, okay, so she doesn't know anybody yet. Why would she pick one booth over another booth as she walks around?
I think like the
The way
social,
it looks.
Danielle?
I think the social aspect, if the seller was really friendly and standing up and, kind of greets her as she walks up. I think, if you're new to town, you want to get to know your neighbors and your community.
Nice. Yeah, I agree. And then someone else said, the appearance of the stall market, the market stall design. Anybody
Having the
else?
product she's looking for.
Having the product. And how does she know that you have the product?
I guess the way you display it.
Okay.
Make sure it's
Yep.
obvious what you have.
And I agree with you, and I would add to what you said, maybe clear signage. Because I work with fruit and veg growers as well as meat growers. Of course, the meat folks can't have all their stuff laying out on display, so they really rely so much on signage. All right, yeah, so that's great. So yeah, she's coming for a social experience. So all we have to do with marketing, and when we take the time, we ought to try to understand this consumer, right? Is we think about what she's seeking, and then our marketing plan, our communication plan is essentially to, like, if you're old enough to have had a tape player, you record, right? You take in what you understand about what she wants, and then you play it back, right? So let's take the example of she wants to support her local farmer. You make sure that your sign that says the name of your farm says the town that you're in. That is a simple and yet sophisticated marketing act, right? Because if she wants to support local, shouldn't we tell her where our farm is, right? Or, I mean, someone said it, if she's coming for social opportunity, absolutely. We're standing at the front of our stall, we're smiling, we're making eye contact, right? We're playing back that there's a social opportunity, I guess you could say. Definitely not the vendors, and I have seen them sitting in a camp chair in the back of the tent with their face on here. Like, why am I stopping here? You better have something really good. So yeah, and then if there's the perception that locally grown food is of higher quality, is more wholesome, more healthy, conveying that with a good display, with fresh stuff, misting your produce, playing that message. So the whole lesson today is really kind of in this one slide. Understand, but we took some time to explore, like, why would she be doing this? Why would she come here? What is she seeking? And then how do we make sure that she knows we've got that? Play it back to her. Not artificially, like we're not trying to trick her, but just tell her what we actually have, and that we are from here, what our practices are, that we're friendly and ready to answer questions and chat if we can. So each customer, when we identify a target audience, and we'll have an exercise to identify a target audience, but each customer is worth thinking about the way we just did with that mom and exploring, I think, these 4 characteristics of that customer: their needs, their motivations, their desires, and their buying habits. So these are 4 things as you talk about your target customer. And, I want you to have a marketing meeting. Your marketing meeting is with your marketing team. Marketing team may be your spouse or your kid or your friend. But you just need a rainy day and a pot of coffee and a kitchen table, and you're having a marketing meeting, and you just talk about who are these customers, their needs, motivations, desires, and buying habits. All right, so let's like get a little bit into each one. A need is very basic. So the customer might say, I need groceries, I need food, I need meat to feed my family. We understand that. That's very basic. They need this stuff. Motivations are, why are they shopping the way that they're shopping or in the places that they're shopping? So there's something else driving their purchase besides just the need. And then I'm going to give you an illustration that says, I want to secure a supply and support local farms. So, when I buy stuff, I want to support local farms, right? That's what we're hearing about their motivation. I don't just want to buy food. I'm not just going to go to any store. I want to support local when I buy food, when I meet that need. The desires, I always call it the icing on the cake. Anything extra that we think we can deliver. So this is getting beyond, again, basic needs and even their motivations, and just thinking about what else can we offer. So maybe they're going to say, this is kind of a bulk meat example. They're going to buy a half a pig from us because they want to secure a supply. This slide's a little bit dated because it's coming from like the meat shortages in 2020, and I was talking, about consumers were suddenly very motivated to buy meat in bulk. They wanted to have a stash in the freezer, just like toilet paper, right? They were buying big loads of toilet paper and storing them in their house. They wanted to know they had that. We don't know what the future is going to bring, but at least I know we've got 40 rolls in the closet, right? This is kind of the same thinking. So they're going to get a half a pig now, but they don't know how to use everything. So they'd love to get help. That would be an extra icing on the cake kind of a thing. And then their buying habits, just very frankly speaking, how do they want to shop? And once again, as a result of 2020, people expect to be able to order and pay you online. They expect you to accept credit cards at the farmers market. They would really love home delivery. McDonald's will give them home delivery, which seems almost unbelievable, right? But I can get a cheeseburger and French fries and a Coke delivered to my house. So if I'm going to make a $400 purchase from you, I'd like to see some home delivery, please. So yeah, just thinking about needs, motivations, desires, and buying habits. All right, so let's talk about how do you pick a target customer. And the reason that you do is so your marketing is more directed. Like I said, it'll have a better payoff. I can call that efficiency. But also it allows you to actually serve your customer better. The more you understand them, the better you can serve them. Excuse me. So I'm going to generalize some basic groups of local food buyers. I wanted a sip of coffee, so I just rolled them all out. All right, so the first one are foodies, food enthusiasts. They shop at farmers markets. They shop with local farms. What are they after? An experience. They want to try new things. They want to try everything. So that means they want to try, weird vegetables, new recipes, ethnic foods, weird cuts of meat, different cuts of meat, but also, they want to try lettuce from your farm, and then they want to try lettuce from somebody else's farm and try another variety of lettuce from somebody else's farm, right? They want to try everything. They want to experience. So that's what they're seeking when they shop. Next, you have that cause-driven consumer. So they're looking to support causes that they believe in when they make a purchase. Those causes, I would say, could be internal or external. Internal causes are my own personal health. I want to eat or feed my kids, right? The best, healthiest food with free of GMOs and pesticides, somebody said earlier. What I perceive to be the best food for my family or for my health. So that's my cause. It's me. The other cause could be an external cause, like animal welfare, supporting the local economy, supporting local ag, and environmental, soil health, avoidance of pesticides and sprays. Right, those are external causes that they want to support when they make purchases. So they're just cause-driven consumers. There can be some overlap, of course, in any of these groups, and certainly we probably think about overlap with the first two, but just think about foodies are food hobbyists. They're spending extra money on food, because they're out to try everything, whereas other people spend their money on other hobbies. I came up dry there. This is their hobby. Definitely people who like to try every kind of wine and every kind of beer, right? That's your category. All right, so then we have traditional buyers, and I don't know what else to call them, but they're just more like traditional buyers who go to U-Pick farms, who buy in bulk so they can do freezing and canning. They buy bushels of apples so they can make applesauce and put it in the cupboard. So they're buying local because they're really driven by the opportunity to buy, I'd say, good quality. Of course, that quality matters, but they're looking at the price side. So buying a quarter of a cow or a half a pig gives you a nice price advantage. Buying bushels of seconds tomatoes so you can put up sauce, that's an economic decision. So they're more like price driven, or maybe we could say value driven buyers. And what I like to say about traditional buyers, they do expect to pay lower prices when they buy local. But they'll come to the farm. They'll buy seconds. They'll buy in bulk. They'll do U-Pick, right? So they're people that were buying local food before it had a name. Right? That's what I always say. My parents in the 70s, they bought a side of beef, and they bought bushels of apples and corn and green beans, and they put it all up. They canned it and they froze it. They weren't local food buyers. They were cheapskates. But it didn't have a name yet. All right, next is the ethnic buyer, or the culturally driven buyer. So they're trying to support traditions, cooking traditions, holidays, and religious traditions, and even religious restrictions. So that's why they're driven to local food. There have been some studies done. Certain populations really insist on the freshest produce you could imagine, and yeah, they're just not satisfied by grocery store produce. They go to local food because they just want to have that level of quality. There are, like I said, there are certain vegetables and cuts of meat that aren't readily available in ordinary grocery stores, that they're seeking, so they're going to come to local food for those, to find those things. And then, when it comes to meat, there's halal or kosher slaughter as a requirement for observant people. So they're going to be, looking to local food as an opportunity to find those things when they can't find it elsewhere. I happen to live in Ithaca, New York. So we're a university town, but we're also very rural. The joke is that we're centrally isolated. So right in the middle of the state, and we're not near anything at all. Except for farmland. So, the local Muslim population reaches out to local farms for lamb and goat, and they, do their own slaughter because they can't walk into a grocery store and find halal meat. That's an example. So just preserving cultural traditions. And if you buy a turkey for Thanksgiving, you're preserving a cultural tradition, right? That's why you ate that protein on that date. So on that day, at least, you're a culturally driven buyer. And then finally, I think this is a new group, and maybe they're going away, but I'm calling them crisis consumers, and they're really seeking security when they buy local food. And we saw that, of course, during COVID. I know lots of farms that just had people showing up on their front porch, farms that don't sell direct to consumer, and people were just showing up, coming out of the woodwork. And then I think there's other crises that we can think about besides climate or pandemic. There was the hacking of JBS, which is one of the big meat processors, and that kind of created a miniature second wave of that, like, panic. So who knows what the next grocery industry interruption will be. But there's maybe still some more crisis out there. Not to be like Mr. Doom and Gloom, but I definitely use that narrative when I'm writing grant proposals. Who knows what's coming next? We got to keep these farms going. All right, so there's some suggested groups. 5, they're still kind of broad groups, but that you can see that we're getting into a little bit more specific when it comes to needs, motivations, desires, buying habits, right? We're thinking about what they want, where they want it, how they shop, what products we would design to serve them. Okay, so you're gonna develop a strategy, and I really work on a single sentence. On the next slide, I'll show you what that sentence is. The point of having a marketing strategy is to focus your brand identity. You're not actually trying to be all things to all people. That's inefficient. It takes a lot of effort. So you're going to focus your brand identity on a specific customer, and then just make all your decisions around that. It will make your marketing labor and your marketing investments more effective because you're aiming at a target instead of broadcasting. You're going to be able to differentiate from other farms and other competitors in your marketplace and define your market position. Your market position is where the consumer sort of thinks of you among their choices. It'll allow you to attract your target customers and allow you to serve them better. So let's dive into the strategy sentence. I recommend at that marketing meeting with that pot of coffee on that rainy day that you write this sentence for your farm. You replace all the words that I have in red with your own words, and you want to get really specific. What you're going to use this sentence for is less to describe your farm and more to draw a caricature of your target customer. So you know how a caricature is like, it's full of exaggeration. Everybody laughs when they see a caricature of themselves, but you can still recognize you. Like they draw me and they make like, I don't know, a big long nose and big bushy eyebrows, but I still know it's me. I'm a little bit insulted, but I laugh and I know it's me, but it's exaggerated. So you're going to use this sentence to make an exaggerated drawing of your customer. So our farm raises, and you describe what you produce, but you describe what you produce from their perspective. It's not a literal list. You're not going to write apples. You're going to write what are they getting from you? And then you describe your target customer. Who are they? And then more about them, something about their demographics, which is kind of, think of that as like census data, like age, income, ethnicity, right? Or there's what they call psychographic groups, which are the ways that we can group people by their behaviors. So mountain bikers all shop for food in a similar way, even though some mountain bikers are 65-year-old white women and some mountain bikers are 18-year-old men, right? They all might be, at least they're shopping for, let's say, clothing or shoes in a similar fashion. So you can think about groups that have behaviors. All right, so you're going to write it. So now let's do this activity. Hopefully no one on here has seen this slide before. I've done this in Rhode Island a couple times now. Here's Kraft mac and cheese. How would we write the sentence for Kraft mac and cheese? Of course, they're not a farm, so we're going to say we make. What do we make? Anybody?
Like a convenient meal.
Ooh, man, you are sharp. A convenient meal. Yep, you're too good. He's smart because he didn't say macaroni and cheese. What are we giving our customer? Convenient meals. Absolutely. Who do we make it for?
Overwhelmed parents.
Overwhelmed parents. Man, you guys are good. You're supposed to give me the wrong answer first, and then I can, bring you to the right answer. But no, you're absolutely right. Sometimes people want to say for kids, right? But yeah, I mean, you guys hit the nail on the head. So, we make what I usually say. Oh, I think I have it on here. We make fast, easy meals. You said convenient for busy working moms who have run out of time and give up for today, right? And what I mean by give up is like they were gonna take that, you know, certified organic roast that they bought at the farmer's market and those carrots and, you know, and prepare a meal. But you're running your kids around, you're picking them up from school, you're taking them to practice, you're walking in the door at 6:30 at night. Kids still got to do homework, you know. Tonight, forget that healthy stuff. We're gonna do this because it's fast and easy. So yeah, you all got it. I learned to work on sentences like this when I took a marketing class in grad school. And in that class were people who were going to go work for companies like Kraft and Coca-Cola. And they would be called what would be called brand managers. And brand managers would literally sit down with their teams and work on these sentences because the sentence can inform all the decisions that you have to make. Okay, it impacts production decisions, meaning what you produce, and it affects marketing decisions like what you say. So let's take a look at this Kraft mac and cheese. If we only had the budget to place an ad in one magazine, I know magazines are outdated, but what magazine would we put our ad in based on the sentence that we wrote?
Good Housekeeping.
Good Housekeeping. Yep. Parenting. Right? So we want to reach this audience. Now, I said busy working moms. That's informed by a little bit of market research. 80% of the groceries that are purchased in the United States are purchased by women. So I'm going to use a little bit of market research to say, I'm not just going to say parents, I'm going to say moms because they do 80% of the grocery buying. Yeah, so we're going to put our ad where moms will run across it. If there was a magazine that was called Busy Working Moms, that would be our like golden ticket, right? That's where we'd put our ad. Now, what's our ad going to say? Arthur, what's our ad going to say?
Well, I think it would be like you don't want to paint them as being overwhelmed necessarily, but like you can like you were saying about having those aspirations to feed them a home cooked dinner and kind of like recognize that their goal wasn't to serve Kraft mac and cheese that night, but sometimes you gotta take the easy path. That makes sense.
Well, yeah, so the easy path, I think the ad could show like a bowl of steaming hot mac and cheese and it could say, dinner's ready in 10 minutes, right? We're
Yeah.
going to tell them you needed fast and easy and we're giving you fast. We're just playing it back to you, just what you said. So yeah, dinner's ready in 10 minutes. I mean, I'm not saying that's the perfect one, but something
How
like that.
about like the easy meal for the hard day?
There
or
you go.
something?
That's excellent. Yeah, so we're going to play back that message. So our strategy sentence is telling us where to place an ad and what to say with our ad. See, so it actually made our marketing job easier. It might have been tempting to think, well, I should pay for this ad to go into like USA Today. That's a newspaper that's all over the entire country and everybody reads that. That doesn't pay off as well as reaching our target audience with a targeted message. Okay, now think about the production decisions. I'm showing you the version of mac and cheese that I ate when I was growing up, but you can see the instructions panel on the side there. You need to boil water, you need to measure milk, and you need to measure butter. How could we improve our product looking at our strategy sentence?
Well, I'm pretty sure I've seen these in the store before. They have like packets of cheese sauce that come with them now.
Right. So since they value it being fast and easy, we can change the product by making it faster and easier. So they came up with that version with the cheese sauce packs. So you don't have to do the milk and butter. But they also came up with a microwave cup. I think you just pour water in it and microwave it. So it's even faster and easier. Because let's face it, when your kids are whining and you have no time, it's going to take that water like an hour and a half to reach a boil. I've been there, right? So this was fast and easy maybe in 1975, but now fast and easy is pour water on the top and microwave it. So they improved the product because they understand what people want is fast and easy. let me jump here. We kind of just did this as an activity, but let me ask, you're all familiar with the North Face? What do you think their strategy sentence is? Or could be? Well, I'll get there for you for the sake of time. I mean, every undergraduate in the United States is wearing a North Face jacket right now, right? But if North Face had come out, I guess they started in 1965. If they had come out and said, you know, we make cool winter coats for the whole family, I think we wouldn't be talking about them as an example today. What they did is they said, we create the most extreme cold weather gear for people who climb the world's highest mountains on the most difficult side. Right? The North Face is the harder side of the mountain to climb. Right. So they served, my point with wanting to do the North Face example is they served a very, very narrow slice of the world. People who climb the highest mountains in the world on the worst side, right? Cold weather gear for those people. And my point is just like with the cheese mac, when you serve your target audience very well, you end up serving a larger population. That is why people are attracted to the North Face, because it's the real thing for a very specific group of people. If they came out and just said, we make nice winter clothes for the whole family, like I say, I think they probably would have been a flop. They served one specific audience really well, and they didn't alienate all other people. No, it turned into, well, if I have to walk across campus in February, obviously I need the most extreme cold weather gear there is, right? I need to buy this brand. So you can take your strategy sentence and you can really apply it to anything. And when I talked about designing or creating your product, carrots are just carrots, but think about how different target audiences would influence the way that you grow carrots and the way that you sell them. And I just give some examples. If we're selling, if our goal was to sell carrots to a large grocery store chain, we'd probably grow this Bolero variety because it stores really well. It's kind of like the most popular carrot for storage. And we would just sell them, in 2-pound bags, just like you find at the stores. But if we were going to sell them to a local foods co-op or a natural food store, maybe we'd do something a little more interesting, like a rainbow variety, and we would keep the greens on, right? Because that's more natural looking and attractive, right? So we'd sell them in little 1-pound bunches with their tops still on, and we'd grow a rainbow mix. If we were selling at a farmer's market where we had a lot of seniors that paid with their nutrition checks, we'd want to find small, thin carrots, that are easy on the teeth. And we'd sell them in small bunches because senior citizens like to buy very small amounts of produce. They don't want 2-pound bags of carrots. They want little bunches of carrots. So we might find this variety romance is a nice skinny little tender carrot, and so on and so forth. So just don't think that it can't infiltrate the way that you make decisions, even on production. If you write a strategy sentence and you really think it through, it's going to inform how you should be selling things and how you should be producing things by understanding your market. And a reality check, your strategy sentence that you write, your caricature that you draw is not for your brochure. So Kraft is never going to say on an ad, we make fast, cheap dinners, fast, easy dinners for moms who give up. That's not going to fly. That's internal only. So when you write these sentences, make them caricatures. They should be like a little bit funny, but they're not for the public to see. They're just to guide your decision making. So when you have a marketing decision to make, you think about your sentence and you say, which way should I go with this? The outward appearance of your marketing will not seem unusual. People aren't gonna notice that you're really catering to your target market. It's when you come up with that ad, it's going to be receptive to all people, and you won't alienate your non-target consumers. Like I say, North Face didn't alienate the rest of the world when they focused on these particular people. They actually drew in all customers. Same with the Kraft mac and cheese. I talked about busy working moms being the target customer. Who else buys lots of Kraft mac and cheese?
College students.
College students.
Yeah.
That's right. And so they see, by serving busy working moms really well, Kraft identified what they can offer, and then college students said, I also need fast, easy dinners, right? So that's who buys a lot of Kraft mac and cheese as well. They didn't get alienated. I mean, when I was a whatever I was, 18-year-old guy in college, I didn't identify with busy working moms. I probably didn't even know any busy working moms, right? But I did identify with, I need fast, easy dinners. So you don't alienate non-target consumers when you have a strong identity and you serve a target customer really well. And the last thing is to say that by default, your marketing strategy, if you don't have a strategy, your default strategy is we sell whatever we have to anyone who will buy it. We sell whatever we have to anyone who will buy it. So it's just, saying that that's really inefficient. In summary, the less you like marketing, the more you need strategy, because it's going to pay off better for every dollar an hour that you spend on marketing. Figure out what fits you, what channels make sense for you, and what target customers make sense for you. Work to identify an exaggerated and specific target market, and then focus your marketing and your production activities to serve the needs, motivations, desires of buyers. Take time to draw a sketch of that target customer, understand them, and then learn to play back the message to them that they want to hear. All right, stepping into market research. This is just more about understanding your consumer. I remember I was giving a talk up in Vermont many years ago, and there was an older farmer in the front of the room, and he was pounding his fist on the table, and he said, we need to educate the consumer about the value of Vermont raised food, right? He's like pounding the table. All right, we need this idea that we need to educate the consumer about the value of, and then fill in any adjective you want. Rhode Island, organic, local, whatever you want, right? This was his concept, but I'm going to give you another way to think about that. Imagine the screen's dark because it's late at night. You've been driving all day. You've been in the car for like 9 hours, and you're on your way to something important tomorrow, something like somebody's wedding or conference or whatever. So you're you're driving, you're exhausted, and you really need a good night's sleep, and then you see that sign on the horizon. So you're like, all right, good, I can check in and get a good night's sleep. So you check in, and this place is totally clean and acceptable. It's a very nice room, and like I said, you're just exhausted and you just can't wait to get to sleep. So you get in the bed and you lay there, and as you lay there, you start to ache. Like you're laying on your side and you just start to ache on that side. So you roll, and then you're aching on the other side, and you realize that this bed is like hard as a rock, right? I just know no matter where I lay, it starts to hurt. So you go down to the front desk, and it's a mom and pop hotel, right? So pop's at the front desk, and you're like, hey, the room's nice and everything, but that mattress is really hard. And he says, I am so glad you came down here to talk to me about this. Did you know? He hands you a brochure, right? Did you know very hard mattresses are proven to be better for you? It's science. All right. He tells you hard mattresses align your spine for better health, and that people who sleep on hard mattresses live 5 years longer, and they earn more money at their jobs, and they have lower cholesterol. This has all been proven. It's all in the brochure. Okay, they have more energy and fewer children. He's just like so excited about hard mattresses. Okay. So now you had this talk. Can you go back to your room and sleep on what feels like a sheet of 3/4 inch plywood because you've been educated, or would you still prefer to lay in a cushy, soft bed for your good night's sleep? Like, I know the answer, right? You don't want to sleep on a rock hard mattress, but you've been educated. The point is, as marketers, understanding the consumer is what we need to do. It's better than educating the consumer. And remember my original definition, it says marketing is the process of understanding what the consumer wants. We're not out to educate consumers. And I'll have a little caveat for that. But basically, what I'm talking about is there's two approaches to marketing. One's called push, one's called pull. And what you have to think about with push marketing is it can also be called production driven marketing. You're pushing the product out into the marketplace. But with pull marketing, the consumer is pulling that product into the market because they want it. So with push marketing, this is where you educate the consumer. The idea is like you're thinking, hey, we make this stuff, right? We have a hotel filled with hard mattresses. We think it's good stuff. It's good stuff. We think you should buy it. So we go where there are people and we try to sell to them. It's expensive and time consuming because of your marketing objective. You're trying to persuade people to value what you've got to offer. You're trying to convince the consumer to try what you've got and to buy it. So you're trying to persuade people to value what you produce. They don't value it now, I guess is the underlying statement, but you're going to push it out onto them. Now think about that. Think about the cost of that versus this. Pull marketing. This is where the consumer is pulling products into the market because they want them. The consumer is saying, I wish there was this stuff. All right. When I first moved to Ithaca, we didn't have a winter farmers market yet. And I was literally at a Christmas party and overhearing someone else's conversation. And they said, I wish there was a place that I could buy local food in the winter. They literally were pulling winter farmers markets into the marketplace, right? People want this stuff that you've got, and this when you're in a pull marketing position, they will buy it. So what do you have to do? You have to go where our target customers are, where people who value what we produce are, just so we can get it to them because they already want it. It's much more efficient and you have a lower marketing cost. Your marketing objective, instead of trying to convince people to value, let's say, hard mattresses, you just have to let people know that you exist and you have what they want. So your marketing objective becomes a lot easier and less expensive. When you think about push marketing, I like to think about like the big national brands like Tide, laundry detergent. To stay relevant, they're always making up a new version of Tide. All right, but then it's push, push, push. There's coupons, right? So that costs them money because they're offering discounts. They even are so desperate to push that they'll mail a little packet of Tide to your house, right? Have you ever received that? So think about that as push marketing. They want you to try it. So they're literally going to mail a little packet of it to your house. So that's push marketing. Pull marketing is think about like when the newest version of the iPhone comes out, there's no push. There's no discounts either. All they have to let you know is that they have it. It's there. People sleep on the sidewalk the night before just to get in the store and buy one. So that's pull example. So you want to keep, by understanding your target consumer and understanding what they want, you're going to keep yourself and your products in a pull position because it's more efficient and less expensive. So market research helps us market our products to those who already value them. We're never in a position of convincing people about the value of our product. Think about the implications on pricing when they already value what you have, right? Your price doesn't become as challenging for that consumer. So what about what you're already producing? You're like, Matt, but I'm already growing carrots and lettuce, right? You have to identify the consumers who already want what you produce. Where are they? Do some market research. Who are the people that value this stuff? Where are they? Where do they shop? What messages resonate with them? How do they want me to reach them? Right? Do they want to be reached on social media? Do they want to be reached by joining my email list? Do I reach them with a postcard? Do I run an ad in the paper, right? How many of them are there? That's some of that market sizing, but understanding. Like if you had families with young children as your target audience, and I think that's always a good one for food, Where can you reach families with young children? Let's say you're going to put up flyers. Where would you put flyers to reach families with young children?
Daycares, schools.
Daycares, schools, churches. Yeah, absolutely. Right. I mean, you could even think about, would it make sense to advertise with like the little league team, to become a sponsor, right? So you're going to think about where do we reach those people? Good answer. So you use market research to keep your products in a market driven space. That's the pull space. Educating the consumer. I said, don't educate the consumer. No, you can educate the consumer in as much as you're helping them get what they want. So let's say a foodie wants to try a new cut of meat that they've never tried before. You're going to help them by telling them how to cook it, or a weird vegetable they've never used. And you're going to tell them, a recipe or how to prepare it. Okay, that's educating a consumer, but you're not convincing them to want it. They already want it. You're just helping them get what they want. So that's the exception when I say educating the consumer. I think nonprofits can run campaigns that say like buy local. That's a bit of a push, but they're using, grant money and time to do that push for you. You're not the one who's trying to convince people to value local food. All right, marketing objectives is the next section of the plan. All we've done so far is identify and understand our target consumer, but now we can kind of get a little bit more practical, because a lot of that was like this gray area, like, well, what do those people want? Now we're going to get a little bit more practical and write some marketing objectives. An objective, like a strategy sentence, it pays off when it's really specific. If you write a strategy sentence, by the way, that says, we produce fresh organic vegetables for families who care about their food, that's not a strategy sentence. It's not a caricature of a customer. It doesn't get at some valuable point. That might be a nice sentence to put on your brochure or to put out to the public, but you've got to write a strategy sentence that's more specific, like ours. All right, so marketing objectives pay off when they're specific and measurable. Think about me and my own objectives, right? I could say, I should put money in savings. This is, I really need to save more money. I should put money in savings. Am I going to save any money after I said this? What's the probability? I'm not going to do anything, right? I'm not going to do anything different. I'm just going to say, I should really put some money in savings. But if I said, I'll put money in savings every month, I've made this a little bit more specific and a little bit more measurable. I think I'm more likely to maybe put some money in savings, because I've said, okay, I'm going to do it each month. Okay, if I said I will put $50 from my first paycheck in savings every month beginning in September, I'm actually going to save some money, right? Because I've made this specific and measurable. I know when to start. I know that if it's the middle of September, what I need to do. I know that if it's the last day of September and I've only put $30 in, I'm falling short of my objective. I need to come up with another $20, or I can change my objective, right? But I would argue it's easier to complete an objective when you make it specific and measurable, because it tells you what to do and when to do it and how much to do, right? When I make that first statement, it's actually really hard to save money if all I ever think is I should put money in savings. That's hard to do, and I'm not going to succeed. So marketing objectives are going to make the acts of marketing easier by getting really specific with them. Objectives and marketing strategy prevent autopilot marketing. And that's what I kind of hinted at in the beginning before I started my slides, is like, you get halfway, it's 3:00 in the afternoon. You're like, oh, I should take a picture and put it on Instagram. That is an act of marketing that's putting something out there, but you're really shooting from the hip. It's autopilot. I think that every post should be accomplishing some objective. And it should be informed by your target audience. Objectives make any goal easier to reach. They don't just have to be sales based. I think it's easy to think about, I want to sell $500 worth of produce this month, but they don't have to all be sales based. They can be more marketing based. So you could say, look, I just need to commit to calling or visiting 4 restaurants this week to see if they want to, place orders with me this season. Just saying that gives you a starting point instead of, I really should try to reach out to some restaurants. Now you're going to take some time. You're going to identify restaurants that make sense for local food. And then you're going to say, I'm going to try to call or email 4 this week. Objectives make sense with a production schedule, meaning you build your timeline of objectives around when you expect to begin harvesting, whatever it is, livestock or produce. When you're going to have product available, it makes sense to build, some objectives around that, and setting a budget. So I think the key ingredients for objectives are identifying your audience for that objective. You've got your target audience, but it could be more specific, like chefs and restaurant owners. To create the measurable goal, how much am I going to do? To set a timeline to it, to devote a budget. It's really powerful to have a marketing budget. A lot of people won't do it. They'll just spend from the hip, and they'll probably underspend on marketing. Set a budget and say, if I could reach 500 customers and tell them about my CSA, that'd be worth spending $200. Now you can build out this objective into an action plan. I've got $200 to reach 500 consumers who are mothers with young children. Right now, you're building up a strategy, and then you develop your action. So think about what you're trying to accomplish with objectives. I mentioned back here, contacting customers, reaching customers, making sales, moving product. Those are good objectives, but there's other kinds of objectives too, like differentiation. So maybe some of those posts on Instagram are to just talk about how you're different from your competitors, keeping it positive, just saying what you're so great at. To do branding, just to reaffirm your brand, and to reach people, just let them know that you exist and you have that stuff. Increasing your visibility and recognition as a brand, building familiarity among your consumers. And positioning. Positioning is a nuanced part of branding and differentiation. It's just how the customer perceives your business or your product. So think about this. You all probably shop at multiple grocery stores, right? You go to Aldi, you go to, I can't think of the chains that are out there. Out here we have, Wegmans, Price Chopper, Target, Walmart, Aldi. All right, let's say those 5. Well, each of those has a position in the market, and you actually use all of them, right? You might think, well, for certain products or certain things, I'm going to go to Aldi, and for other things, I'm going to go to Wegmans. All right, so that's position. It's a nuanced sense of their points of differentiation and their branding, but you can control your positioning with what you're saying and what you're doing. Yeah, the way the consumer might describe you, they'll say, oh, they're the ones that, like, how would you answer that about Aldi's or Wegmans, right? Wegmans, oh, they're the ones that, whatever you would say. Okay, an objective pays off when it's specific and measurable. We said that. The key ingredients to writing objectives are what the objective or goal is, and people use the words objective and goal interchangeably. Who your audience is, setting a budget, a timeline, and an action. I think we kind of already said that. It's going to make getting this stuff done easier than if you don't create it. So here's a little example. We're going to say, okay, last year, I grossed an average of $525 per farmer's market. And I've heard farms say, I want to make more this year. Well, what's more? Is $526 more? Right. So think about what is your objective in this situation? And I guess I have some answers. All right. So we're going to say, okay, what I want to do is I want to gross an average of 750 instead of 525. How am I going to go about that? Well, first, who's my audience? I'm going to look at my target audience from my strategy sentence. I'm going to give myself a budget. So I'm going to spend money, $75 a week, in order to increase sales, in order to make money. My timeline, as I'm looking at my market, starts June 21st and it runs through Halloween. So I'm going to take this $75 a week across these weeks. So what am I going to do? Well, I brainstorm with my team and we come up with, we're going to have a sign that says, 10% off any order of $20 or more. I'm going to put up this big sign. So if I can get 38 customers to spend over $20, I'll actually have reached that $750 goal. So that's, I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to offer this discount. Maybe that'll incentivize more spending and more shopping. All right, so that's how I'm going to execute. And then I realized my wife would look at that sign. It would take her about 2 seconds. 10% off $20 or more. I'm saving $2. Big deal. What can we do to make this more interesting? How could we encourage more shoppers to spend more money so that we can reach our sales goal? We're willing to spend money. We can spend $75. So what can we do to make this a more interesting offer?
You can give them something for free.
I totally agree. How about people who spend $20 get a pint of strawberries, right? We're gonna until we run out. $75 of the strawberries we give away. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. We can give something away. When you spend, I mean, I think that, like I said, my wife does a lot of our food shopping. She'd look at the 10% off and be like, no. You tell her, if you spend 20 bucks on produce with me, you're gonna get a free pint of strawberries. She's gonna add an extra item until she hits 20 bucks because she wants the strawberries, right? So I think that's a great idea. Okay, so we just reviewed a marketing plan. Excuse me, and I have homework if you care to do it. I mean, it's up to you. I think it's worth doing. For marketing strategy, the idea is that you write a strategy sentence. Remember, it should be exaggerated. It should be a caricature. It should be something you do not want to show these people, right? That's how you know you're drawing a good caricature. And then just sit around and talk about these customers and understand them more. When you've got that caricature, now you start to talk about, well, what do they want when they shop? Where do they want to shop? How do they want to pay? Where do I reach them? Just understand more. What's the trend? What are they trying to do right now? What are they looking for? Okay, formulate some objectives that you want to get accomplished with them in mind. And then brainstorm, like Kelly just did. We had this budget and this timeline. What would really engage these people? What could we do? If we had 75 bucks a week to blow any way we wanted, how do we think we could reach this goal? We can come up with really innovative and fun and interesting and engaging solutions. And that's what people are going to see. I didn't spend time on this, but they're going to see the action plan. That's the communication that you put out there. Hey, this week at market, anyone who spends $20 is going to get a free pint of strawberries until they run out, right? You're going to put that out. That's what they're going to see. But it's not just shooting from the hip. Oh, they're having a discount. No, we're pursuing objectives that we've laid out, right? We're doing something deliberate with this activity when we put that post up on Facebook. It's not just a discount for discount's sake. And I'd say, I think I see a lot of autopilot marketing out there in the world, particularly from small businesses. I think sometimes they see the big corporations that have teams of people on the marketing staff. Their marketing is deliberate. And then down at the small business level, where we're busy with production and operations, we tend to just mimic what we're seeing out there. But I'd say, you should be having deliberate marketing outreach, and that comes through working out on your plan. I think, I hope that this talk through here gives you, I'm going to call them marketing goggles. You should be able to see through what's out there in the world, what advertisements and promotions, and try to decode what are they driving at, what are they trying to do this week when they put that stuff out there, because now you've got this like insight from behind. Okay, another way to think about all of this, because I'm personally a visual learner, I don't know if you are, is to think about, you've got this target, it's at the center, right? That you're aiming for, and then you've got your farm. So the marketing research, first of all, you've identified your target, that's in blue. And then your marketing research is coming from them to you. You're learning about what they want and you're trying to understand them. So that's flowing from your target audience to you. And then when you understand it, you're using objectives and communication back out to reach them. So that's how you reach your target market. And what about those other rings around the target that aren't your target? You're going to draw those customers in too with your clear brand identity and a clear statement of what you have to offer. So you don't have to really worry about them. They're just going to come to you naturally, like every college student who buys a North Face but never climbs a mountain, right? Or every college kid that buys mac and cheese. By serving your target population really well, you're going to draw those other consumers from those concentric rings on the target in to purchasing with you instead of trying to serve everybody. So that's a visual way to think about it. All right, I'm going to talk briefly, just shut my window. Are there any questions? I mean, I've been trying to, I just managed to lecture for an hour, but, have some back and forth. And before I jump into this next discussion, are there any questions about the stuff that we already talked about? Okay. Hearing none. I mean, sometimes that's a bad thing, but at least it's not a bunch of black boxes and no questions. All right. I'm going to talk a bit about some research on marketing that I've done and specific to farmers markets, and just give some tips and advice based on what we found in the research. So I'm going to kind of go quickly through this, but we're right on time. We have 20 minutes left, and you don't have any questions. So I did something called market channel assessment, and I'm jumping right into it here. But market channel assessment was some research we did back in 2008, 9, and 10. I worked with 30 different farms in New York, and I just said, let's collect some data for 1 week on how much time you spend working in each channel that you sell and how much money you generate from those channels. So we can assess which channel is sort of best for your farm, what channels are weak, and if a channel is performing weak, are there things that you can change to improve the performance of that channel? Or when a channel is really strong, can you expand it? Can you do more business in that channel? So we just wanted to get a read on how different channels perform and what the implications were for farm management. What we found is that farmers markets typically were the poorest performing channel for any given farm. So you can see here, for each hour that they spent working specific to farmers markets, they were generating about $31.63 in sales. And they were spending about 22 hours a week on farmers markets. Most farms are doing 2 to 2.5 markets a week. And that meant they were spending lots of hours on marketing at a farmer's market, meaning harvesting, washing, packing, driving there, setting up, selling, packing back up, and driving home. That was taking about 22 hours a week, and it was generating about $31 in sales for each hour. Compare that to CSA distribution, where they, harvest, wash, pack, and deliver CSA shares. But because the volume of product that they were selling and the way they valued it, it was more like generating, $56, $57 in sales for every hour that they spent working in that channel. So it's a much stronger performance as a channel. And then we had all wholesale, meaning sales to grocery stores, restaurants, and distributors. We lumped that all together, again, because you're usually delivering a large volume or a high value, dollars worth of product to the customer in one brief shot. It's a strong performing channel. About $51 in sales for every hour spent in that channel. And then we took the average of all channels and we came up with this 37. So farmers markets were even performing worse, let's say, than the average of all market channels across all farms. So this is some research we did back then, and it's research that are presented on at conferences, like 50 different times at conferences over the course of years. And eventually someone walked up to me and said, they read my name tag at the conference and they said, I know you're the guy that hates farmers markets, which felt awful because that's not at all true. Farmers markets offer
a lot of value that's not measured here, right? So if you're new in business, you're going to get customer feedback very rapidly. They're going to tell you, I don't like when eggplants get this big, right? You're going to get a lot of customer feedback that's very valuable early on. Farmers markets are relatively easy entry, meaning, you can join a farmer's market and have your entire tomato crop fail and still participate in the farmer's market. It's less commitment than, let's say, selling to a restaurant or a grocery store or even a CSA where they're expecting their tomatoes. Right, so it's sort of easy entry, and in that respect, it's lower risk. It does come with certain risk of lost sales, like a bad weather day means no sales or something like that. But another thing about farmers markets is they are a place where you can recruit customers for your better channels, right? Where do you get CSA members from? Well, they meet you at the farmers market. So they shop with you at the farmers market. They meet you. They find out, the quality of your stuff. They find out that you're local. Now they join your CSA and they move over to your more efficient market channel. Or if you have a U-pick operation or a farm stand, they meet you at the farmers market and then they begin to patronize those other channels. So there's a lot of value in farmers markets, and just because the data is showing that it's a poor performer isn't a reason to exclude farmers markets. And certainly I wouldn't say that I hate farmers markets. But we found that they were consistently a poor performing channel across all farms. But they have other benefits, like we just said, and they're also still popular. They're popular among farmers and they're popular among consumers. So the real research question for my next project was, what can we do to increase sales at farmers markets within the farm's control? Like, you can't control the weather, and when you join a farmer's market, the hours are set by the market management or the number of competitors in that market. That's out of your control. So those things aren't worth studying, but there are factors that are within your control. And really the research question is, if farmers markets have value but don't perform well when it comes to income, is it possible for us to get more money out of the market? So this led to doing research with point of sale, not the other POS, point of sale. I was emailing all the farmers that participate in this, and I was writing in the email, "Dear POS farmers," and then I was like, no, I'm not going to say that. But if you're familiar with Square, that's the system that we ended up using for our project. It's probably the most popular point of sale system that's out there, and so it's just on your phone or iPad or your device, and it allows you to run a cash register at a farmer's market, is what it really boils down to. It's for accepting credit cards, but you can also record cash sales. So what you're really doing is passive data collection. You're creating a highly detailed data set of all your items and all your sales and all your prices. When you cash out a customer, you quickly collect price, quantity, and unit for each item that you sold, the customer transaction total. So you're looking at customer spending. You're getting customer counts by looking at the number of transactions. Each transaction is tagged with a time, a date, and if you set it up, the location, and then how they paid. Did they pay with cash card, Apple Pay? It accepts Venmo, and there's other POS systems as well, like PayPal. I think QuickBooks has one. Now you can export that data out of the system, and you can use it for lots of different things. You can use it to study customer spending, which is what we did. But I'd say you could use it as a proxy for some other record keeping. So some farms that participated in my research, they had been counting, for the example of eggplants, they'd been counting how many eggplants they brought to the market. And then when they got home, they'd do another count, and that's how they'd figure out how many eggplants they sold. But you don't have to do that when you have a POS system. It's going to give you all those records, so you can use those as a proxy for harvest records and yields of your crops. Because the number that matters, practically speaking, is the number that you sold. You can also program it with who is using, so you can compare your staff and you can compare your locations for performance. And if you learn Excel pivot tables, they are really easy to use. They're very quick to learn and easy to use, but they summarize huge, banks of data in a very fast and handy way. So I encourage you to learn about pivot tables. Yeah, so we just saw this as a great opportunity to study customer spending at farmers markets and look for opportunities. And as economists will say, well, ag economists will say, you can't improve what you don't measure. But I'm just going to flip that around and say you can improve what you do measure. So with our research, we looked at customer counts, how many customers per market or per hour, customer transaction size, which is to say customer spending, but also how many items were customers buying, daily gross sales, the average value of an item that they had for sale, and then how different items sold. If you want to look at improving average daily gross sales, right, daily sales, you can look at the number of customers that you get and how much they spend on average. And that's really, you multiply those two and that's what you get. So we can look at improving daily sales by trying to lift up either side here. The number of customers, we can get more customers who keep spending the average, we'll make more money. Or we can keep the same number of customers and get them to spend more and we'll still make more money, right? So we can work on either side. So where are the growth opportunities? What we learned from the research is that customer spending, don't confuse that with customer counts, but customer spending falls with each passing hour of a farmer's market. This is true for meat vendors and vegetable and fruit vendors. So the first hour is the best hour of selling, and then sales begin to fall. So what do we do with that information when we know that? There's two implications. One is make sure that you are set up and ready to sell on time. If you get to the market late, you're missing on the best customer spending of the day. If there's not a rule against selling before the official market start time, I would be set up early. Here at the Ithaca Farmers Market, the start time is 9, but there's no rule yet. Maybe they're going to create one because I keep saying this, but there's no rule that says you can't sell before start time. So it's better to be done setting up your stall and ready to take customers at 8:30, because those most serious spenders come in at 8:30. They want to avoid the traffic and they want the best selection of goods. So they come at 8:30 and they're ready to shop. If you pull up at 10 before 9 and you're still setting up your stall, you're missing the best spending of the day. That's one implication. Another implication is that as customer spending is going to fall, and you see these graphs through the course of the day, you can find ways to try to engage people for more spending. So I wouldn't do, let's say I wanted to do free samples of a variety of apple. I wouldn't bother doing samples during peak spending. I would do samples later on in the market. People are wandering around, there's still people there. I want to try to engage them, get them into my stall, now have them try an apple. Maybe they'll buy something, and it'll increase customer spending. I think it was Kelly that said, as this market time dwindles, stay smiling, looking out, ready to greet people, ready to make eye contact, right? Don't say, well, now the market's so slow, I'm going to sit in the back of my stall and do Wordle. Stay up front, keep being engaging, and maybe even consider special promotions. So maybe you do 2 items for $7. You don't put that sign up until 1 o'clock, right? You don't put that sign up until late in the market. You're just trying to engage and then create more spending later in the market. Those are the 2 implications from what we found. Customer spending, customer transaction size shrinks with each passing hour. Another thing that we found, this is from a statistical analysis of 26,000 transactions, is that when a market stall gets really busy, customers tend to spend less. Now, we really wondered what happens when there's a line. What does it mean? But the statistics say when a market stall gets busy, customer transaction size begins to shrink down. With each additional customer in a 5-minute period, those customers start to spend less money. How do we counteract it? There's a couple different ways. One is to have a good market stall design so that you can process customers quickly, reducing busyness, right? Customers want interaction with you. We already discussed that earlier. They want to come ask you questions, get recommendations, whatever. So you want to reduce busyness so that there's more time for interaction. It seems like if the less they get to talk to you, the less they're going to spend. They can't ask you those questions, get recommendations. I mean, they came to the farmers market to hear about your experience as a farmer and to hear your recommendations. And now you're so busy, they can't get that. So they wind up buying less. So one idea to counteract this is to have a good market stall design so that you can move customers through. And I have given you a drawing, and it's really based on this farm down in the Hudson Valley that's, does really, really well with busyness. Just one guy working, he can handle customers very quickly with his market stall design. Another way to counteract this is to add a second person. Or when you're in your busiest hours, adding a second person at the market cuts busyness in half, right? It instantly gives you 2 people. Okay, another opportunity. It says this: we found that customers that are shopping with buying vegetables, tend on average to buy 2 items, and customers that shop with meat vendors tend to buy 1 item. So how can we increase customer item counts? The lowest hanging fruit to bring your average up is to look at customers who just buy 1 item and encourage them to buy a second item. Anyone have ideas of how we can get 1 item customers to buy a second item? Well, we could suggest it, pairings. Or what were you going to say?
I was gonna say something like that, like have a recipe that includes more than 1 item.
Yeah, you could have a recipe. You could suggest a second item. Keep the impulse items close to your cash register. So berries, cherry tomatoes, beef jerky, snack sticks, right? Keep that at the register. So they come through, they buy 1 item, and then when they're going to pay, they see that pint of berries or that jerky. I could eat that jerky right now, right? Maybe they grab a second item, or you suggest a second item. Hey, you're getting onions. Do you need some garlic too? Because you always cook those things together. You could think about ideas. You could also bundle items like we kind of talked about earlier. 2 for $7. Ground beef is $7 a pound, but you can get 2 for 16. Right, so you can just try some bundling. They'll push up the item count. And then another thing that we found, so the average customer transaction size in 2018, this is pre-COVID. In 2018, when they shop with a fruit and veg vendor, they spent on average $650. They were buying essentially 2 items and spending $650. So the average item value was $3.38. Besides increasing the item count, how can we get more money from a 2-item customer? Right, there's 2 ways, and because of the sake of time, I'll say what they are. One is that we can increase the package size, and that's something I really found with the 2018 research. You can sell, I have it here, 1 carrot for $1. That means you're gonna allow customers to make $1 purchases with you, right? That's in your control. You can set the bar how little someone can spend and still shop with you. So we're gonna sell 1 carrot for $1 versus we put 3 carrots together and we say it's $3. We're increasing customer spending without increasing the unit price. It's still $1 a carrot in my kind of silly example. But we saw this in 2018. There was a farm that was selling a single head of garlic for $1. So they're allowing people to shop with them and spend $1. Why not put 3 heads of garlic into a pint container and market $3, right? You're not changing the unit price, but you are increasing customer spending when they shop with you. The other way is to increase prices. Hey, look, a bunch of carrots used to be $3, now it's $4. And that's something that you should introduce price changes gradually, but price increases do in fact increase customer spending. They don't guarantee increased daily sales because there's a chance that some consumers will react to the new price and choose not to shop with you. But those people that do shop with you and become customers will in fact spend more money with price increases. So it's a moving, there's a lot moving there, customer counts, customer spending, daily sales. But this is just some hints from the research and some practical ways to implement what the statistics were showing. With that, I'll offer my email address. I'm really happy to take an email from any of you at any time with marketing questions, pricing questions, and we still have maybe a minute or 2 for any last minute questions.
I had a question. Are you familiar with, I've been looking last couple of years at different, services. Are you familiar with Barn to Door?
Yeah, not enough to like
Hmm.
compare it to other services, but certainly
Yeah.
have heard of
I'm
Barn to
just
Door.
talking in general, those services, where, you're basically, one of the things I've learned, I've watched a lot of their videos and other services too. Seems to be popular out west and, as far as Kentucky, I've even seen some in New York State. But, they're basically using, farmers markets to build their subscription services.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of versions of that out there, but it's in response. I think some of that existed pre-COVID, but then it's really
Yeah.
like mushroomed since then. But yeah, the consumer would like to be able to shop online, even if it's to swing by the market and pick up their order, but it's already been packed for them. Kind of like what's the grocery store version of that? Instacart,
Hmm.
or for home delivery services. So yeah, I would say it's a good path to go because it's responsive to consumer needs.
Mm.
And research the different platforms that are available to you, and if that's the path you want to go down, yeah, pursue something like that. But it seems to make sense. All right,
Any
well,
other, any other questions? No? Thank you so much, Matt. I really
yeah, my pleasure.
appreciate that was excellent. Um, I'm gonna give everybody like a 4-minute break before we get started with Amanda. So if you wanna just take a bio break and then we'll get started pretty quickly. All right, welcome back, everyone. Our next person today is going to be Amanda from the Carrot Project. She's the first in her family to have grown up outside of the family farm, though she never strayed away from working with food. Her commitment to building a more just and sustainable food system has led her to varying roles in food production, manufacturing, and distribution. Previous work includes managing food safety within the Rhode Island Community Food Bank's warehouse and across a statewide distribution network, in conducting research for the University of Massachusetts and its agricultural extension program. Through the Carrot Project, Amanda supports beginning, immigrant, and BIPOC farmers and food entrepreneurs to ensure their businesses have the resources they need to thrive. Amanda is also involved with the Agricultural Viability Alliance, supporting a professional network of regional farm and food business advisors. Amanda has a BS in food science from the University of Massachusetts Amherst and calls Rhode Island home.
Thanks so much, Trisha, and thanks for having us out today, as well as to the Boots to Bushels program. Just on a personal note, I am in Cranston, Rhode Island, so it's really good to like work with URI. Have had a couple of family members go to the school as well, so just wanted to say, like, on a personal note, thank you as well. So today we've been invited to share a couple of our top business planning tips that we see from reviewing business plans all the time. And as well, just share a little bit about what the Carrot Project does, who we are, how you can work with us. And I really intend this to just be a question and answer space. So just use me as a resource during this time. Before I get started, just out of curiosity, how many people have written their business plans already for their farm? Like, I'm just kind of curious, like, where folks are. Great, great. So people are starting to write it. Is everyone here, like, are folks already farming right now, or are they aspiring farmers? Is it mostly aspiring farmers? Okay, okay, great, great, great. Yeah, that's really good to know. Thank you. Okay, so let me start sharing my screen. Okay. I'm gonna try and see if I can still see everyone. Okay, perfect. All right. Can you all see my screen, by the way? Okay, beautiful. Yeah, so I work with the Carrot Project. And the Carrot Project, we are a nonprofit that works with food and farm businesses on a variety of different business services. So kind of our main thing is we combine on-the-ground programs serving food and farm entrepreneurs. We have research branches. We do a lot of collaboration with area organizations such as the Boots to Bushels program. We also have couple of advocacy programs as well. But really our goal is to just provide information, skills, and training so that farms can stay farming. So we are really hoping that farms can stay viable for the long term. And a lot of that, I know farmers don't go into farming because they want to be business people. But unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, but in order to stay farming, there is actually a very strong financial component to keeping that farm going, especially given that farming is something that is really tight margins. There's a lot outside of the farmer's control. So the fact that you all are taking this course, you're learning the resources ahead of the time, that's awesome. Like, that's really good to know. Okay, great. So in terms of what we offer, so we offer business advising and coaching, so one-on-one supports where you can work with one of our staff or advisors. When we start working with folks too, if we set up a long-term scope of work, we'll actually work with them for 2 years because we recognize that, it takes a while to see changes, and farming is kind of something that happens in the long term. We also offer a number of trainings and workshops, so I'm constantly bouncing around teaching in various capacities. And then we also have our own loan program, as well as services to get folks ready for loans, because we want you to have a very strong first impression when you're approaching a lender. And so we can help get that loan application package in order. In terms of who can work with us, so we serve really businesses across the gambit. So startup, early stage, expanding, and established farms. For trainings, anyone can join us at any time. For the longer term scopes of work, we do want people to already have had a business plan, strong financial projections. So we want to have like a set of numbers to work with you. If you're not at that stage, taking classes like this one is great, to just start writing that business plan. All right. So at this time, I just want to share a couple of our top business plan tips. So as I said earlier, I read a lot of folks' business plan, and I actually read, Trisha, if you don't mind me pointing you, I actually read her business plan, and that's how we met at an agricultural conference, and then we were like, let's connect, and I ended up reading it. So it is something that we do, and we just really love digging into the numbers. So these 3 things that you see on this screen are kind of our top tips that we find ourselves coaching farmers with when we're reviewing business plans. So the first thing is, number 1, our top recommendation is to really ground the business plan in the numbers, which means really grounding it in the financial plan. In your case, because everyone here is an aspiring farmer, really grounding it in solid financial projections. So a lot of times, it's super exciting, you're writing it, it feels like, so we end up getting kind of like a narrative of like, this is what I hope my farm to be, this is the mission of the farm, this is who I'm going to be selling it to. But the part that we really want to see is the part that's like, okay, I expect all of these plans to cost this much. I expect my expenses to be this much. These are the capital expenses that I need to buy. So my farm equipment, the seeds, the fertilizer, the gas to get from market to market, the market fees. And then this is how much I expect to make from selling. Same thing when you start doing your market analysis or market channels. It's like, really, we want to see the numbers of like, this is how much I reasonably can expect to see from selling at this farmer's market. I've been to the farmer's market and checked the prices. Like, it's those kind of things. Those numbers are going to really ground you with what's realistic, because otherwise what we find is a lot of folks get really excited, which is awesome. But then the plans get very ambitious. But once you actually start writing in the numbers, you start realizing, oh, like slow and steady is going to win the race. So yeah, so our first tip would be really ground the numbers, like really do your research into the specific type of farm production you want to do and really like look into those numbers. So as you're doing those numbers, that brings us to our second tip. So our second tip is to really take care when comparing against established farmers, such as when building numbers. So I know there are a lot of really excellent farm business planning books. I know I have, like, you can't see it, but I have a shelf over there of books written by other farmers, and sometimes they will share their own projections. And so what we find sometimes is farmers will take those projections and then use that in their business plan. So the reason that we say you want to take care is because an established farmer has gone through the trial and error years at the beginning. And in some ways, farming is always going to be trial and error. But they've figured out what works for them, the workflow that works for them. They have efficiencies in a way that if you're just starting out, you don't have. They may have staff that have been with them long-term, maybe volunteers. So again, their efficiency is going to be higher than someone who's just starting out. Same thing if you look at income. So they have established markets in place. They've already built their brands. They've already sold. And so maybe they can command those higher prices. I think that's what Matt was sharing, right, at the very end when I caught on. So again, when you're comparing, when you're starting to write your numbers, just be careful with comparing to established numbers. At another workshop that we did where we talked, the tip that my colleague, Jeff Cole, who works with me, he actually said, when you're looking at numbers, have what you think you're going to make and double the expenses that you think you're going to spend when you're first starting out and you're comparing to established numbers, to established farmers. So yeah, just wanted to share that. Another thing too, that we find is really being very specific about your market. So as an example, Providence and the Providence market is going to be very different than the Boston and the Boston market. And Boston is close enough for us to be able to commute and sell there. But again, like the prices that you can get at those farmers markets are going to be different. Maybe the farmers market fees are going to be different. So again, as you're writing your business plan, really getting as specific as you can about the specific market that you're targeting is going to be really, really helpful. And then the final tip that we have is, as you're writing the plan, to really remember who the audience is. So I like to compare the business plan in some ways to like a resume. So if you think about when you apply for jobs, you have a master resume, and then for every single job that you apply to, you kind of tweak the business plan to match the particular employer that you're looking for, right? Like I have a different cover letter for every employer. So it's kind of the same thing. So I find when we review business plans, it's really heavily focused on the mission, heavily focused on the value that you're going to bring to your customers. That's a really great marketing plan. That's a really great language to share with your consumers and who you're trying to, build a relationship with. But a lender, such as a loan, such as like USDA, I see Chris Lawton is here from Farm Credit, they really want to see the numbers. Like they do want to see your mission, they do want to see the narrative, but they really want to see the numbers and how you plan to pay that loan back. Same thing if you're looking at, say, an investor. An investor is also going to want to see a different set of numbers, a different type of business plan. So just a quick tip is when you're writing that business plan is just really remember who the audience is. Some audiences are going to care more about your mission, your value. I'm a sustainable farm. I raise my farm using really awesome sustainable practices. The chickens and the cattle are living a good life versus, hey, like I plan to be profitable. This is the profit margins I'm planning to project. Some people are going to want to see that. Other people are going to want to see another thing. So yeah, great. And with that, this is my contact information here. And I'm sure, Tricia, you can also send around my email as well. So at this time, happy to take questions. Any questions?
I guess. Oh, sorry.
No.
Just curious about like the one-on-one, like the future planning. So basically you look for someone that's got like kind of a couple of years of sales records and have really fleshed out a business plan, then you kind of help them just strategize on farther growth. Or
Yeah, so our criteria, so again, trainings and workshops, always welcome to anyone. Come on whenever. Coaching, so if it's just a quick call with me, so same thing, again, I'm just gonna keep pointing to you, Trisha, like she and I just sat down for an hour and I reviewed her plan and I gave her a couple of quick tips. And then we were like, let's connect, let's reconnect. For the longer term, like 2 years worth of working with someone, our criteria is you need to either be actively farming or within 1 year of starting to farm. And that within 1 year is like, I don't want to say it's really our assessment of being 1 year, but it's like, so for example, if I see someone's business plan and it's really clear that the numbers are wildly unrealistic, they've really missed a lot of key expenses or revenue, they may think they're within 1 year starting, but I would really encourage them to, hey, take some more classes like the class you're currently taking, do a little bit more research, then come to us. And so like, we really want, once we start working with people, like our advisors are really like financial, like this is what they do, is business advising. And so we really want to see like a strong set of financial projections, a strong cash flow, a strong budget, maybe for the first year or first 3 years of working. That's where we can really say, okay, let's really dive into the numbers. Let's figure out how we're going to make this profitable for you. So the services we can offer. So assessing profit and loss. We can do enterprise budgeting. So if you're planning to add a new crop or a new product or a new livestock or something like that, we can help assess and write those enterprise budgets. We do a lot of QuickBooks and accounting. So setting up like good, strong accounting systems. Again, loan readiness is another one. I'm trying to like think of, we do any kind of financial advising. The two things we don't do is any legal questions. So if you're looking to set up a business, so what's the difference between LLC versus sole proprietorship? Those are really legal questions. We don't handle legal questions. The other thing that we don't do a lot of support on is taxes. Because again, with taxes, there are some like legal ramifications for the guidance that we share. So any other business support besides legal or taxes we can support on. So I hope that answered your question. I know that's a little,
great, thank you.
a little long.
That helps. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Just curious, as people have been writing their business plans, like what have been the kind of stumbling blocks, or what are the challenges that folks have had?
I think not really. Like I didn't grow up in the area where my farm is, so not really knowing the market super well. I think it's kind of something that just takes a couple of years of going to markets, even as a consumer, and just sussing it out. But it's hard to kind of take a target customer when I don't know which one's going to be enough of a base to work on that specific kind of customer.
Yeah, Arthur, if I wouldn't mind asking, like, where are you in Rhode Island, or are
No,
you?
I'm in Maine.
Okay, you're in Maine. Okay.
Yeah, like pretty rural central Maine.
Got it. Yeah, because I think one thing that we really recommend to folks is like, especially if you're aspiring farmer, is I would encourage you, if you can, to volunteer or work on a farm before you make a big financial commitment and commit to a lease or purchase land, right? And so, because I think that's a really good way to, like, number one, learn a lot of the production techniques, and just really understand, like, this is the type of farming that I really enjoy. So sometimes, we've worked with farmers since like they go in really wanting to do a certain type of crop or a certain type of production. And then they apprentice and they realize, like, you know what, like this is something else that I actually really like doing. So if there's a way to like kind of get some hands-on experience first, that's really going to be really helpful. And it's going to give you a much more realistic sense of how much time are things going to take? How much are things going to cost? What is the market? Because you're going to be working with farmers. And I know there's plenty of farmers. I know one of the big questions we get is labor. There's not enough labor to go around. So I'm sure if you know any farmers, they would be very happy to have you come out and help in some way. If you are in Rhode Island, New England Ag Exchange is a like big ag resource board that's run in Rhode Island. Trish, I see you nodding. So I don't know if we've covered this, but they will post. A lot of farms will post on there, like if they're looking for help, or if they're looking for any other kind of support. So that's just a really great way to get hands-on experience. And we would highly recommend doing that before, again, like committing to a lease, buying equipment, purchasing farmland. Those are all really big financial commitments. And so if there's a way for you to kind of baby step and test it out, we really recommend that. Great.
Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions?
Amanda, you had mentioned that you teach classes. What is the best way for this group to just keep an eye on what classes are going to be coming up?
Yeah, great. So we are actually pretty much at the end of our class season. So our busy season is the reverse of a farmer's busy season, right? So we don't really teach classes in spring. Sometimes we go into early spring, but it's really the fall, winter timeframe that we teach classes. So probably the best way to keep in touch is through our newsletter. And I can send Trisha the link to sign up for our newsletters. So you can sign up there. On our website as well, we have an events page, and we keep that updated with all the upcoming workshops. So again, right now we don't have any workshops coming up, but come fall and winter, like let's go, go, go. Yeah. Great.
Any more questions for Amanda? Doesn't look like it. Thank you so much. That was great to cover all of that. And hopefully some people will reach out who need some help with their business plans or other business planning. And I think I'll let you go and give everybody a 5-minute break again. Everyone get up and stretch and grab something to eat. And then Chris is here, who's our next presenter. So we'll get started right on the dot at 11.
Great. Thanks so much. Take care, everyone.
All right, everyone, welcome back. I'm a minute early, so I just want to slow down for a second. I see a couple people need to pop back on. Let's see. All right, Chris Lawton is the Director of Knowledge Exchange at Farm Credit East. He coordinates Farm Credit East customer education and beginning farmer programs. He holds a bachelor's degree in horticulture from Cornell University, an MBA from the University of Massachusetts, and a Master of Science in Resource Economics from the University of Connecticut. Chris grew up in Eastern Massachusetts, where he worked on his family's greenhouse nursery business before joining Farm Credit East.
Thank you, Tricia. So let me just make sure you can hear me and see my slides okay? Okay, great. So today I'm going to talk about agricultural business basics. I guess I have an hour time slot, Tricia, is that correct? Okay,
Correct.
so I'll allow plenty of time for questions at the end of the presentation. And if there's questions that come up during it, feel free to interrupt me and ask a clarifying question or something like that as we go through it. I suspect that probably there'll be a lot of overlap between what I'm going to present and what you'll get from other presenters in the class, because we're covering a lot of the same ground, no pun intended, of farming and farm business management and that sort of thing. So let me get right into it. So I'm going to introduce Farm Credit East to you for those of you that maybe don't know who we are or what we do. Then I'm going to talk about financial statements, cash flow budgeting, financing and credit for farms, and then we'll have, like I said, plenty of time for questions and answers. So Farm Credit East. So we are part of the National Farm Credit System, which serves the entire country. It's made up, the farm credit system is made up of about 60 independent farmer-owned cooperatives that each have defined territories. So our service area is the 6 New England states, New York and New Jersey, and we have 25 offices throughout that region. We are owned by our customers. We have 18,000 customer owners across those 8 states. And we have, we're going on $11 billion now invested in farming, commercial fishing, and forest products. And part of our mission is to serve young, beginning, small, and veteran farmers. One of the things that's probably less well known about Farm Credit East is our core business is lending money to farmers, loans and leases for equipment and buildings and things like that, and real estate. But we also offer a number of services like payroll, weekly paychecks for employees, on-farm and remote record-keeping services, business consulting, tax planning and preparation, estate planning and farm transfer, and we have a crop insurance division called Crop Growers. So I guess that's the end of my little infomercial, but I just wanted to make sure that you are aware that we exist, and for more information you can check us out online at farmcrediteast.com, or obviously ask me any questions you might have at the end of the presentation. So one of the great things about running a small farm is that you get to define what success means for you. And for many farmers, perhaps most, success is about more than just financial gain. And their enterprise has a number of often non-financial goals. But one of the things that I emphasize when I'm talking to farm groups is that profitability has to be in the mix somewhere as a prerequisite to achieving those other non-financial goals. Because if you're not profitable at least some level, it doesn't need to be the entire focus of your business, but it needs to be in there somewhere. You're not going to be financially sustainable over time. So there's 3 main skill areas for success. There's production management, which is of course your core farming activity, growing your your fruits or your vegetables or your livestock or whatever you have. Then there's marketing, who is going to buy it and at what price and where. And then there's financial management, managing the finances of your small business. And the nexus of those 3 skill areas are where, farms are most successful. But it's hard for everyone for an individual farmer to be an expert in all those areas. So it's important to build your skill set in the areas where you're weaker and partner or hire or otherwise get access to those skill sets that maybe you're not as strong in. So moving on to financial statements. This is maybe not the most fun topic out there. I know most people don't get into farming because they love financial statements and spreadsheets and paperwork. That's not usually the main thrust of their interest, but it's a really important aspect of agriculture. So there's 3 main financial statements that basically all businesses, not just farms, but any type of business use. And that's true whether it's a small farm or it's Ford Motor Company. If you go online, you can bring up the annual report of any publicly traded company, and you'll see in the back of the annual report, after you get past the glossy pictures of the board of directors and everything else, they'll have their balance sheet, they'll have their income statement, and typically they'll have their cash flow statement as well. So anything from the smallest to the largest of businesses use these financial statements. They look different, for a small business versus a large complex business, but it's the same concept. So the balance sheet is basically a snapshot of the business's financial health. It's as of a specific date and time. So it might be like December 31st, the end of a year, or the end of a quarter or a month, because it's going to change almost every day as you write checks and take payments in. So that's the balance sheet is basically like your location of where you are financially. The income statement tracks the business's expense and income over a period of time. So the income statement might be for the year ended December 31st, or the quarter ended, or the month ended. And then the cash flow statement looks at your cash going in and coming in and going out. It's very similar in many aspects to the income statement. Where they start to get different is if you start buying and selling a lot on credit or terms. If you start taking in supplies and the supplier gives you like 30 days or, if you're lucky, more than that to pay. And, that's going to separate the incurring of expenses versus the payment of expenses. The same thing with if you're selling things on credit. If you're selling product and you deliver it to a store and they don't pay you for a month, that'll make your income statement and your cash flow a little different because you're not getting cash right at the time of delivery. And I'll explain this and get into it a little bit later. So the balance sheet, it's a pretty simple equation, but it bears repeating. It's your assets. So you'll want to list out everything you own, and don't worry at this point whether you owe money on those assets. It's just everything that's in your name. So obviously cash would be an asset, but inventory, money that customers owe you, like accounts receivable, that's an asset. Real estate, obviously, machinery, vehicles, all that sort of thing. Step 2 is to list out the liabilities, everything that you owe, whether they're secured by an asset or not. So any kind of loans, any trade credit that you have, any money you owe to others, any long-term leases, things like that. So your assets minus your liabilities equal your net worth. So pretty simple equation, but here's an example of a very simple balance sheet. So this farm has $10,000 in cash, $6,000 in supplies, $15,000 in equipment, and they have a truck that's worth $10,000. So their total assets are $41,000. Then in liabilities, they have some credit card debt, they have a loan, so their liabilities are $24,000. So their net worth is $17,000. And if you add back liabilities and net worth, you get back to $41,000. So these two sides of the page balance, and that's why they call it a balance sheet. Right now, this is a very simple picture, so it's pretty easy to make it balance. But as your balance sheet becomes more complex, that's a good error check to make sure that you didn't make a math error somewhere. So if we look at a more complex balance sheet for an actual business, this shows 2 years of balance sheet line items at December 31st of year 1 and year 2. And we can see that they have varying amounts of cash. They have accounts receivable. And here they're grouping things by time. So they're grouping things in terms of what they call current, intermediate, and fixed assets. And what that means is the speed at which it could be converted to cash. So current assets are things that are cash equivalents, like a bank account, or are presumed to be converted into cash within the current period, like within a year. So accounts receivable, presumably your customers are going to pay you, in 30 days or 60 days. Supplies would be used up in your production, and prepaid expenses, also would be used up in your production. Intermediate assets are things that are like a 2 to 5 year time horizon, maybe. So things like vehicles, machinery and equipment, things that are a little bit harder to sell, and things that are kind of used in the operations of your business. So they're assets, you own them, but they're not readily available to pay bills with. So that's why they go in intermediate assets. And then fixed assets are even longer term assets. Typically, this is real estate or buildings. So farm real estate is there. And if you total them all up, this business has, at the end of year 2, just under $600,000 in assets. Then they have, in a similar fashion, they have current liabilities. So that's any money they owe that's going to be due within the current year. Intermediate liabilities, so that's that 2 to 10 year time horizon. So here they have an equipment loan that's going to be, met of a term of 5 years or 7 years. And then they have long-term liabilities, which are basically their real estate mortgage. So that's, a long-term liability. And you can see here that they have net of CP. That means net of current portion. So they've broken out what's due the current year. So this, I can actually tell right now that this equipment loan has a 10-year note, because 10% of it is due in year one. And then their long-term liabilities, their mortgage has a 20-year term because 10,000 of it's due in year one. So that's their, the net of the current portion. So it can get more complex as your business grows and becomes more complex. So that's why I showed this, to show an example of a more complex, business balance sheet. But ultimately, the principle is the same. It's assets minus liabilities equals owner's equity. And then if you add total liabilities and owner's equity back together, you get the same number as what you started with in the assets. Any questions about balance sheets before I get into it? Before I get into the next statement? This is usually one of the key things that a lender is going to look at, because it tells how much you currently own against and how much you currently owe against those assets and what your financial picture is. So as I said, the balance sheet tells us a business's financial situation. It tells us their cash position or their liquidity, what they own, how much debt they're carrying, and what their net worth is. So moving on to the income statement. In a similar fashion, the income statement is three steps. So it's income, all your revenues, any income that comes in the door, minus your expenses, whatever you spent to generate those revenues, equals your net income. So pretty simple equation, but it gets, obviously more complex as a business grows. So here's an example of a abbreviated income statement, what we call a 5-line income statement. So this shows gross sales. In this case, this farm at 134.4 in total sales for the year. Their cost of goods sold, or sometimes it's referred to as their variable costs, came to 80,000 and change, or about 60% of their sales. And this is a real farm. And the reason I include this example and the percentages is because this is kind of typical of what a lot of farms, obviously the numbers vary from one farm to the next, but the percentages are pretty typical of what a farm might have for income. So gross sales minus cost of goods sold leaves you with gross margin, and that's what you have available to cover your overhead and your profits. So in this case, we have 54,304 in gross margin. Out of that 54,000, 40,000 of it is consumed by overhead costs, or sometimes referred to as fixed costs. And I'll explain what these terms mean in more detail in a minute. And that leaves 14,000 in net margin. And why is it important to have that 14,000 in net margin? Well, obviously we already talked about how profitability is very important to have to be financially sustainable, but to drill down more specifically, out of net profit has to come any debt principal payments you make. So any payments you make on loans, your interest would be included in overhead costs, but the principal portion of that loan has to come out of profits. And then the other thing that comes out of profits is any reinvestment in the business. So for better or worse, farms have a continuous need for reinvestment. Anytime a farm is growing, especially, but even if it's not growing, your equipment is wearing out, it's depreciating. You're going to need to replace things at various schedules, and you need profits to basically reinvest in that business. In this case, the other question that may come out is, how is the owner getting paid? In this example, the owner is getting paid out of overhead. We have an owner draw in there, which I'll show you in a minute. So the owner's not living off this 13,000, but it's still, this is still a part-time endeavor for this person. They're not, the owner's draw is only a portion of that 40,000 in overhead. So they're not living off this venture. They're paying themselves a little bit of money, but it's still a part-time endeavor. So this just shows you how quickly the money goes. 134,000 sounds like a lot of money, but after you take out what they spent to generate their products and then what their overhead was, it goes pretty quickly. So what are cost of goods sold or variable costs? They're basically any expense that helps produce another unit of output. So they're the direct inputs into your product. So those are things like production labor, seeds, fertilizer, feed for animals, fuel, supplies. In my personal background, I came from a greenhouse background. So let's say I'm growing hanging baskets. What would be included in my cost of goods sold would be the plastic baskets, the growing media, my starter plants, my production labor to pot up those plants. Those would all be part of my cost of goods sold. So in contrast, fixed costs are costs that remain the same regardless of variations in productivity. In other words, they're the things that you need to basically open the door and turn the lights on in the morning, and they cost the same whether that greenhouse is empty or full. So things like your office expenses, your property taxes, interest on loans, depreciation on equipment, those things that don't really change, like I said, whether you're producing whether you have an empty or a full greenhouse, or whether you make 100 hanging baskets or 200 hanging baskets, they're going to stay the same. Or when they change, they tend to change in steps as your business grows and expands and invests in new facilities. So if we look back at that 5-line income statement, we can see that their gross sales of this example are 134,000. They spent 80,000 to create those products that they sold. And then that left them with 54,000. They used 40 of that in overhead expenses, like, property taxes, depreciation, interest, and then that left them with the remaining net income. So here's an example of a earnings statement or income statement for a dairy farm. In this case, it's by per hundredweight of milk, so they broke it down that way. But it just shows you, and they have years of comparison. But it just shows you how it can become more complex. So they have various categories of sales. Milk obviously is the number one, but then they sold cattle, they had sold some crops. Then they had various costs of goods sold inputs. Obviously, the big one is purchased feed for the animals. Number two would be hired labor, and then a lot of other inputs. So out of that $30.60 that they get per hundredweight of milk for their farm, they're spending about $19 of that on their cost of goods sold, the cost of producing their products. That leaves them with roughly $12 in gross margin. So then the bottom half of this statement would be, again, we see the cost of goods sold and the gross margin, and then all their overhead expenses. So we have insurance, interest, rent, repairs, taxes, property taxes, that is, utilities, other expenses, that sort of thing. And then depreciation is usually a big one. And then that leaves them with net earnings at the end of the year. So that's an example of a more complex income statement for a business. So what if your gross margin is too low? What if this, $12 in this case per hundredweight for milk, what if that's too low? Well, there could be a few reasons. One is that it could be that your price is just too low. Now, if you're a dairy farmer, you are a price taker. You take whatever the market gives you. You can't really go to the co-op and say, I'd like to get a little more for my milk, please. They're going to pay you whatever the commodity price for that milk is as of that month. But if you're a farmer's market vendor, you do have a certain amount of pricing power. Now, that pricing power is not unlimited. You can't just say, I'm going to sell this tomato for $10, because then the consumer is going to walk away. But you do have some degree of pricing power in that you can set your own prices within a certain range of what's acceptable to the consumer. So it could be that you're underpricing yourself. Another reason for low gross margins, it could be that your cost of goods sold is too high. Are you producing your product efficiently? Do you need to make more efficiency gains in your production? Are you operating your facilities at capacity? So that's something to look at. And then the last thing to look at, or the last major factor, is what I call shrink. then if your shrink is too high, shrink is basically any product that's grown or made or purchased, but not sold due to any number of factors, which could be lack of demand, quality, spoilage, theft. Shrink in a perishable industry like agriculture can kill you because because all those product costs are still embedded in your expenses, but you got no revenue for them. So that's why, like, for example, if you're a primarily a direct consumer vendor and you're selling direct to customers, it can often be a good thing to have a wholesale outlet that you can wholesale your surplus at in order to monetize it and get at least something for your surplus production. Even if you don't make a lot of money at that wholesale price point, at least you're getting your cost of production back, hopefully. So, because if that goes to shrink, if you don't sell it at all, you still put all those costs into that product and you got nothing for it. And spoilage can be by, actual spoilage of the produce, or it can be spoilage by date or something like that. Like, again, going back to my greenhouse example, we grew holiday crops. We grew poinsettias for Christmas and Easter lilies for Easter. And after the holiday, those crops are basically worthless. They still look good, but no one's going to buy a poinsettia on December 26th. So if we could have grown a great crop, priced them right, had an efficient level of production, but if on December 26th, that greenhouse is still half full of poinsettias, we probably did it all for nothing at best. So that's why in our primary market for my family's greenhouse was directly to consumers, but we had relationships with the florist wholesalers. So if we saw on, say, December 10th, our sales weren't tracking the way we wanted them to, and it looked like we were going to have some left over, we could say, hey, can I unload 100 poinsettias with you at whatever wholesale price you're willing to pay? And that way I get at least some of my production costs back, so I'm not eating those costs at the end of the season. So that's a good, thing to have multiple market channels available to you when you're selling your products. And another lesson from that is that it's okay to sell out. Now, you don't want to sell out in your first hour at the farmer's market, probably, because you're missing a lot of sales. But it's okay if you're getting towards the end of the day and you're selling out of your product. Good for you. You're probably better off selling out a little bit early than getting every sale you can, but still having product left over. So what does the income statement tell us? Well, it tells us obviously at a very macro level the profitability of a business. It tells us what the gross sales are, what the spending on various categories of expenses are, and their net earnings over a period of time. So any questions about the income statement before I move on to the next, the cash flow and cash budget?
I have a question, Chris.
Yeah.
For depreciation, is there a formula that you use to
Yes.
Okay.
So for depreciation, typically for most farms, they're going to use what they call straight line depreciation, which is basically where if you buy a tractor for $10,000, just to make the math easy, and let's say I anticipate this tractor is got a 5-year lifespan, then I would depreciate $2,000 per year for that tractor, because that tractor doesn't cost my business $10,000 the first year I use it. To be fair to the business, it's really only costing me $2,000 a year for 5 years, because that $10,000 investment is going to carry me for 5 years. But it's important I track it, because that equipment's wearing out, and at the end of those 5 years, I'm going to need to replace it. So a straight line depreciation is what's most commonly used. Now, for tax purposes, there are various depreciation schemes you can use called accelerated depreciation, where you can take a bigger depreciation chunk in year one to offset earnings, so you don't have a higher tax liability. So that's something that like a tax accountant might play. That's like a game that a tax accountant might play with your tax filings to reduce the check you have to write to Uncle Sam. But for management purposes, usually straight line depreciation is the most fair to the business and the most easy to track. And that's actually a good segue into like tax planning. Your tax return is really not the most accurate measure of your business's profitability, because what's the point of a tax preparer? It's to minimize your tax liability, right? You want to reduce the amount that you have to pay Uncle Sam at the end of the year. So they're finding every expense they can and every amount of depreciation they can take to offset your earnings, so you have to reduce your tax liability. So a lot of farms, you can get your taxable earnings down to a very low amount, but your farm really is probably more profitable than what your tax filings indicate, if that makes sense. So really, you shouldn't be, for management purposes, you should have management financials, not just be relying on like your Schedule F as your earnings statement for your management purposes. So cash flow. Cash flow statement and cash flow budget are basically the same thing. It's just one is rearward looking and one is forward looking. So if you hear cash flow statement, they're usually talking about what the cash flow was the prior year, whereas a cash flow budget is looking ahead at the next year. So what you would want to do for a cash flow budget is you take that, like I mentioned here, the 5-line income statement that we had, here where we have the gross sales, cost of goods sold, margin, overhead. You would take that, plug it into this, and you would take out things that are not cash expenses, like depreciation, for example. You don't write a check for that. That's just the rate at which your equipment's wearing out. So you take it on a cash basis, your income, your cost of goods sold, your gross margin, your cash overhead spending, and then your net cash earnings. Then you would plug in what you start the month with. So let's say you start the month with 10,000 in the checking account. Your net profit for the month was, the net cash generated for that month was 3,000. So that becomes your change in cash. So your ending cash for this month would be 13,000, because we started with 10, we added 3, we ended with 13. That becomes the start of the next month, and you just carry it forward as you go. Now, the reason it's important to do this month by month is because, especially in a cold weather climate like New England, your cash flow is going to vary substantially by month. If you're, say, a vegetable grower, your revenue in January, February, March is probably going to be almost nil, or maybe nothing. Maybe if you're selling CSA shares in advance or something like that, you might have a little bit of revenue, but and your expenses might be nothing too. But when you get into like April, May, you're probably starting your seedlings, maybe in a heated hoop house or something like that. So that becomes a very expensive month, because you have no real revenue, but your expenses start to creep up. So that's where you want to look at that starting cash. Your change in cash might be negative $5,000 for the month. So that if you started with 10, that leaves you with 5. That becomes 5 to start the next month. And if you're going to burn through 5,000 again in May before you have any revenue yet, you're going to run out of money. So that's why doing this exercise, planning out 12 months ahead, your cash flow budget is going to be really useful. And if your ending cash goes below 0 in a given month, you need to really look at what's happening, because that means you're probably going to run out of money. So you want to look at, okay, do I need to secure a line of credit from a lender to bolster my cash flow early in the season, and then I pay it back later in the season when I have revenue? Or do I need to put money from my personal savings into the business to bolster my starting cash point for that month? Or do I need to look at my expenses, and maybe I can't spend as much in a month and need to match it tighter with my revenue? There's a lot of things you can do to tweak your cash flow, but it's a lot better to do it on a spreadsheet or on paper than to just have it happen in real life and look at your checking ledger and say, geez, I'm going to run out of money this month because I have all these expenses and not enough revenue. So, and when you do this, to make it more accurate, you can blow this up, so you're not just having 5 lines of your income statement. You can itemize, okay, what are all my cost of goods sold? What's my labor going to be? What's my, do I have to buy fertilizer? Do I have to buy seeds? Whatever else. What's my overhead? What's my rent? What's my utilities? What's my fuel bill going to be, those sort of things. And that will help you pencil out what your cash needs are going to be as you go month by month. And this is something that a lender is going to want to see as well, because this helps tell the lender, if I loan the money, could they cash flow the payments? If your ending cash every month indicates that you have no surplus left, that's going to be a challenge to provide financing, because they're going to want to see that you're going to be generating enough cash, at least in your revenue heavy months, to repay that loan. So the cash flow budget tells us basically the ability of a business to pay its bills, the ups and downs of a farm's cash position during the year, and then, like I said, the ability of a farm to cash flow debt payments, as well as other needed investments. So moving on to financing a business. Before I move on to financing, any questions about financial statements? Hopefully that you see the importance of having kind of all three of those things. So I'll move on. So financing a business, one of the things that comes up, and especially when I talk to beginning farmer groups, is they often inquire about grants. And there are a number of grants out there for agricultural businesses. And grants are great, but they come with caveats. One is that seeking and applying for them can be time consuming. They often come with strings attached. The grant maker is usually seeking to promote some type of public good. So in other words, it's not usually about you. They're not out to just, I want to give money to Fred's farmer. They're out to achieve things like energy efficiency, research, conservation, business development, and the economy, things like that. And so if your business aligns with those goals, then you may be a good candidate to receive a grant from whatever agency is making those grants. But keep in mind that it could have outcome or reporting requirements. If you took a grant that's oriented towards job creation, you may be on the hook to create that certain number of jobs. There's not a lot available for pure startups. Sometimes there are, but not usually. They're usually more oriented towards helping businesses that are already in business grow and expand, or do things like energy efficiency or whatever else. They often cover a portion of expenses. So like one grant that's pretty common out there is called REAP. It stands for Rural Energy for America program. And that's an energy efficiency grant through, I believe it's USDA Rural Development. And REAP is a great program, but it typically covers up to 50% of a project. So if you have like a greenhouse and you're going to put in new high efficiency heating, REAP might pay for a portion of that, but you still need to come up with the match and pay for the balance of that improvement. So it's not just like free money from heaven. It's, you have to come up with a portion of that. And so it requires planning and that sort of thing. And you just want to make sure that your business goals align with those of the grant maker. You don't want to become like the tail wagging the dog and chasing a grant that doesn't make sense for your business, because A, you're probably not going to get it if it doesn't fully align with your business goals. It's not going to be a strong application. And B, you're going to spend a lot of time and take your business maybe in a direction that doesn't make sense for your long-term goals. Having said all that, it's worth checking to see what's out there. We have a grant report. If you go to farmcredits.com/grants, we basically compiled everything we could find by doing a lot of internet sleuthing essentially, and put it all in one 40-page document that's organized by category. So it lists who the grant agency is, what the target of the grant is, what the funding range is, and then a link to the page for it. Not all of them are open all the time. Most of them go on like annual cycles. So they may not be open today, but they may open at some future date. It's also worth going to your state's Department of Agriculture page. I believe every New England state has a grants page on its Department of Ag page, where you can maybe see what's more currently available through the state. You can also talk to USDA at Farm Service Agency and see what they might have. But you need to kind of manage your expectations. You're not going to get a grant that's going to buy a farm for you or put up a new barn or something like that. It might they usually help around the edges, if you will. So for debt financing, there's a lot of options available, and you may need to pursue more than one. There's the Farm Credit System, represented in the Northeast by Farm Credit East. There's the USDA's Farm Service Agency. They offer both direct financing as well as guaranteed financing, which what that means is that you may get a loan through Farm Credit East, but if you're a borrower that is what we call on the bubble, meaning like it's a risky deal, we may secure a guarantee through the USDA to guarantee that loan. And what that does is that backstops our losses if the loan goes bad, and that helps make a deal work that might not otherwise happen. The seller can be an important source of financing, whether it's a piece of equipment or a piece of real estate. Sometimes the seller will provide, allow you to pay them over a period of time. There's commercial banks that are doing financing for agriculture. There's angel investors or nonprofits. One of them is just spoke to you prior to me. The Carrot Project does beginning farmer financing on a small scale. There's other nonprofit investors there. And then there's what they call CDFIs, Community Development Finance Institutions, or Economic Development Agencies. These are often sometimes referred to as first opportunity lenders, meaning that they provide capital to startups or early stage businesses, and they're worth considering too. So you may need to look at one or more of these sources of capital, and you may not get the full amount that you need from any one of them. You may have to what they call stack your capital from different sources. So and the other thing too is to keep in mind, if one says no or not yet, that's not necessarily the end of the story for you. There may be another option. So what does a farm lender look for? And this is pretty true, whether it's us, whether it's USDA, whether it's a bank. There's typically 5 considerations that a lender is going to look at, and we call them the 5 C's of credit. So the first one is who are we lending to? Now, obviously, your character is much more than your credit report. I don't mean to impugn that it's not. I mean that it is the same, but from a lender's perspective, it's a big indicator of it because it shows how you've handled debt in the past. It looks at your performance on your current loans, any existing debt that's there. You should know what's on your credit report. It's not a bad idea to pull your credit report at least once a year. And this is the website. You can do it for free, annualcreditreport.com. There are 3 main credit reporting bureaus. There's TransUnion, Equifax, and I forget the third one, but they will sometimes try and sell you credit monitoring services for X dollars a month or whatever else. And you can do that. But you can also access your credit report for free once a year by going to that website. And it's a good idea to check it out every so often because for one thing, there are people that share your name out there. The key thing is they look at name, birth date, and social security number to identify you. And those tend to be unique, that combination of things, but errors happen. So there may be stuff on your credit report that's not from you. And so obviously you want to correct any errors that are there. And it's also good if you're working with a lender to be able to explain any problems that are on there. So if there's a big default on your credit history, you could say, well, I mean, I'm just speaking hypothetically, like maybe my spouse got cancer and we couldn't pay the bill right away. And so we had to settle with the medical company or, whatever. If you can explain things up front, it's less likely to derail your application later on. So those are a few things there. At Farm Credit East, we do look at the credit score, but we look more at the report itself, meaning like if your score is low because you have a lot of student loans, that's one thing. If your score is low because you have a lot of defaults, that's a different thing. So we look at, why is it low if it happens to be low. Capacity for Farm Credit East, this is the #1 thing that we look at. And it's basically your capacity to repay. So it's, what are your earnings today? What will they be after the investment? History is important. Typically, a lender is going to want to see 3 years of tax returns. They're going to want to see income statements or cash flow statements from the farm. Projections of budgets are useful as long as they're realistic. Off-farm income can be pretty important, especially for a beginning farm or a small farm. Off-farm income can be an important source of repayment. And the more contingencies involved, the more risky it is. So if the earnings today are not enough to cash flow the loan payments, you're relying on, we're going to build this farm stand and then people will come and spend money. That's a contingency, and that those people may or may not show up. So it's important to, it's one thing if you have a realistic projection and, you can make a leap of faith that, yeah, if we put up a new farm stand, we'll have sales of a certain amount. But the more if statements, the more contingency statements that there are in there, the riskier the deal is. Collateral, this is the lender's fallback position. Real estate is obviously the best to work with, but different lenders will often take things like machinery and equipment, inventory, livestock as collateral. But keep in mind, particularly with those latter three, they're going to think about what the recovery value of that is. So they may not value it at the same as you do. Like if you have a lot of inventory and you're valuing it at the retail selling price, the lender is going to think about like, well, what will it get if we have to auction it off in a distressed sale? So that's a different number. Capital is what the borrower has as skin in the game, basically like down payment and net worth. Ideally, you want your net worth to be above half, because that means you own more of your stuff than your creditors do. If your net worth drops below half, that means your creditors own more of your stuff than you do. If it drops below zero, then that means you have negative net worth. And that's not unusual for a beginning farmer, especially if they're just out of school, because they may have a lot of student loans and not a lot of assets. And that can be worked around depending on the program that the person's applying for. But it does propose a challenge because that person's carrying a lot of debt load and may not have a lot of income. And then conditions are basically the terms of the loan, how long the loan is going to be. Real estate can go long-term, machinery and equipment can go typically like 3 to 7 years. Inventory is typically less than a year. You want to make sure that the loan term is equal to or shorter than the life of the asset financed, because basically you don't want to be finance a piece of equipment that wears out, breaks down, and is sold or disposed of, and then you're still making payments on it. And that, because typically at that point you're looking to replace it. And if you're still making payments on the older piece of equipment, it becomes hard to do that. So one thing that I tell people is, if you can't cash flow the payments for a piece of equipment for no more than 2/3 of its useful life, think really hard about whether that investment makes sense for your business. Because what happens in the last third of a piece of equipment's life, like if you have a tractor that you think is good for 10 years, in years 7 through 10, you have repairs, right? So if you're still making payments, you have repairs, and you're thinking about replacing it, that becomes a big cash drain on your business. So ideally, you'd pay for that piece of equipment in years 1 through 6, so that in the last few years, you can be saving up for its replacement. So just to recap, character, capacity, capital, collateral, and conditions are things that a loan officer is going to all look at for a loan application. So just a few kind of lessons learned. One is, if you're borrowing for a construction project, assume that you're going to have cost overruns, because they happen, and everything costs more than you think it does. A lot of times people are, they're budgeting for a construction project. So, okay, I'm going to build a house and I'm going to build it next year in 2025. And what am I going to base my costs on? I'm going to base them on what historical costs for building that house might be. So, but the problem is I'm budgeting next year's costs on last year's expenses. So obviously things are going to cost more. You may get into things and find out that they cost more than what you initially expected. And the lender is not necessarily obligated to increase their line of credit just because you had a cost overrun. So you want to avoid a scenario where you have the half-built house and you're running out of money. This is a big one that we see in agriculture, and this is capitalizing operational losses. And what that means is it's not unusual for a farm business to have a bad year. It's in fact extremely common, especially in a commodity-oriented business like a dairy farm. Milk prices go up, they go down. In a low-price year, it's not unusual that a dairy farm might lose money. They may need to borrow to cover those losses. You know, that's okay to do it 1 out of 5 years maybe, but you want to think about what's going to change so you don't have the same conversation the next year. If you're at a point where you need to capitalize losses multiple years in a row, you need to really think about what is going to change beyond just hoping it gets better. And that's the point at which lenders would start to say no and cut off a line of credit or something like that, because it's in no one's interest to just erode equity on a business. It's if the farm is on a trajectory where they're losing money year after year and trying to capitalize those losses with equity, you want to stop that train while there's still equity left and not just keep lending and lending and lending until there's nothing left. So that's the point at which, you know, 1 year, fine. If it's multiple years, we would say, hey, you know, you really need to think about either radically adjusting your business model or a voluntary sale, because, you know, you want to preserve the equity that's in your business. This is what I talked about. You know, you want to avoid financing beyond the useful life of an asset. I was driving the other day and I heard a car commercial, and they were offering like 8-year terms on a car. And I was thinking like, boy, I don't want to be making payments on an 8-year-old car. And then they have the fast talking guy at the end of the commercial that they always have. One of the things that they usually slip in there is they say negative equity may be refinanced. What that means is that if you have that 8-year term on that car and you bring it in to trade it in, you probably owe more than it's worth at that point. And they're not going to forgive that loan. They're just going to take what you owe beyond the trade-in value of the car and add that to your next loan. So you're just like, you're digging a hole. So, you know, sometimes people term out loans because they have to make the payments cash flow. But if it's a piece of depreciable equipment, you really want to make sure you can cash flow it within the lifespan of that equipment. Lack of commitment, you know, everyone has tough years. You got to stick it out. Typically, if you're approaching a loan officer, what they're going to want to see is 3 years of tax returns, both for personal and business, if it's a separate entity. They're going to want to see financial statements like balance sheets for personal and business if they're separate. Look at your credit report ahead of time. A basic business plan is important. It doesn't have to be long and complex. It doesn't have to be 100 pages. If you're going to do a vegetable farm, we're not really interested in what the global market for broccoli is. What we want to know is like, what are you going to do? Who are you going to sell to? How are you going to make money? Those key things like that. Basic description of the business, a rough budget, and how you'll pay back the loan. Being able to pay back the loan with existing cash flow is ideal. Payback plans based on projected increase in business is risky. It doesn't make it impossible to finance, but it makes it more challenging. And because of that, one of the things that we, Farm Credit, did for beginning farmers is we created a program called Farm Start, which is geared towards beginning farmers that might not meet traditional credit underwriting standards. So it's designed to provide operating capital. So it's not designed to provide real estate or like secured credit, because that you can get like a mortgage for. But what becomes difficult to finance, especially for a beginning farmer, is that those operating expenses, those cost of goods sold that you have to, you know, if you have you might buy a farm with a mortgage, but that gets you dirt. Now you need to maybe put up a hoop house, buy pots, plants, seeds, fertilizer, those sort of things. And we saw a lot of beginning farmers putting those expenses on things like credit cards and that kind of thing, and other kind of unhealthy ways of financing. So FarmStart provides up to $75,000 in capital with no collateral or down payment required. And the starter farmer has up to 5 years to pay it back or roll it into conventional financing. And it's at prime rate. So unfortunately, prime rate is rather high right now at 8.5%, but it's certainly a lot lower than like what a credit card would be. There are other options out there for beginning farmer capital. USDA has a microloan program through Farm Service Agency. Carrot Project has beginning farmer programs. There's a business called Dirt Capital that's based in the Hudson Valley of New York that I think is active in New England that offers beginning farmer capital. So there's multiple options out there. But FarmStart is one that we came up with. And over the last 15 years, we've done more than 400 of them, I believe. So it's not like a very small program. We've done a lot of them. Some loan offs or turnoffs, poor records. We joke about the shoebox method of accounting. If we ask a farm what their records look like and they have a shoebox full of receipts, that's not the best way to keep records. Maybe have that as backup, but hopefully you have a spreadsheet or something like that. Excessive existing debt can make it difficult. Really low credit scores, relying too much on collateral, not enough earnings. Low personal investment and commitment. Having a plan B if things don't go the way you expect them to. Just a few things there. And our lending philosophy is basically we want to make safe and sound loans. We want to manage risk. We need to preserve both the equity of the cooperative because we are farmer owned and it's not our money. We're loaning out the money of the cooperative and want to make sure that loan is going to come back. We also want to preserve the owner's equity. Not every deal can or should work. Sometimes we may say no, but what we're really saying is not yet. Meaning like, okay, you need to do these 3 things and then come back and see me. Maybe that's getting some on-farm experience if you've never worked on a farm before. Maybe that's getting some education, taking programs like this. Maybe that's getting more experience. Maybe it's starting to generate some revenue and then come when you're ready to ramp up rather than do it pre-revenue. We want to avoid making unsound loans that put the borrower underwater. In other words, loaning money that the borrower can't repay, because if the business venture doesn't succeed, that debt doesn't magically go away. And we want to avoid putting borrowers in a position where they have a business that didn't succeed and now they're stuck with repaying something. So we want to focus on continual relationships and being a business partner over the long term. And as I said at the beginning, we have a commitment to serve a diverse agricultural community, including young, beginning, small, and veteran farmers. So that's, I guess, a nutshell. I used up almost all my time, but hopefully this will spur some conversation or discussion. I know there's something you have at noon.
Yep, we have something at noon. Is there anyone that has any questions? That was a
So
lot
I
of
hope this was useful, informative.
Mhm. That was a
I'll
lot of
let
good
you get on.
information. Yeah, sorry, I keep
Yeah,
cutting you off.
I'll let you get on to your next agenda item. But thanks everyone for your attention and thanks for having me. And Tricia, let me know if I can do anything else for you.
Great, thank you so much, Chris.
Okay. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. How we doing?
Good.
That's good. All right, so the last thing we have today, it starts at noon. I'm gonna put a link in the chat. It is a roundtable discussion with the Rhode Island Food Policy Council about some legislation about keeping land and agriculture, I believe. I think it's going to be relevant, even if you're not in Rhode Island, because food access to land is important to all of us in New England. So it's an optional segment that you can go to. I'm putting it in the chat right now. You just have to log in to this other Zoom meeting. What I'm going to end up doing is closing out our Zoom meeting. So if you want to copy this and or if you miss it, you can email me and I can send you the link. And they're supposed to be recording it as well. So anybody who is watching this post today, I'll have an additional recording whenever they send that out. And the recordings do take about 24 hours, which you guys don't need to worry about in class. And there is a homework assignment. They're under the human risk folder on Brightspace. There's a video. It's about an hour long. It goes over, I think, oh my gosh, I can't remember what it goes over. I made it so long ago, but I think it's over employing people on the farm and some of the risk that's associated with that and maybe working together. So I just wanted you guys to watch the video and then post on Brightspace Engage, preferably a couple lines, something that you learned from it. If you don't have access to that, you can just email me. But tomorrow I'll send a wrap up of everything from today, and we'll include the link to that video in case you can't get on Brightspace Engage. Thanks so much for engaging with the instructors today and for being here. And I hope to see you in this roundtable discussion. If not, have a great afternoon.
Thank you, Trish.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Trish.